Welcome to the collection of the wildest and craziest AITA Reddit stories of all time. From wild betrayals to shocking twists, these tales will leave you questioning who is really in the wrong. Let's dive in together. The first story for this collection is from Tenor Sounds. AITA for telling my father he has to accept if he wants to have a relationship with me. My father, 58M, and I, 32M, have been trying to reconnect and build a relationship over the last several years. He wasn't a good dad when I was younger. He went through some tough times, self-inflicted in case you're wondering, that separated him from the rest of us and his family. But now he's back on his feet. An important part of this situation is that in pulling himself out of the hole he was in, he went from a Jesus-loving Christian to a self-described biblical scholar that has completely given his life over to the Lord. Another important aspect to this is that he's a charmer, big personality that can verge on manic at certain points. He likes to poke and prod people to make a point, and he's pretty good at manipulating a conversation if you let him. So, we are in contact and having phone conversations. My husband and I met up and had lunch with him and his girlfriend, now wife, etc. He's happy to be back in contact. Big hugs, big smiles, nice and polite. But now he's really into his religion, talks about how it saved him constantly. And he isn't as subtle as he thinks in trying to convert or convince me that I should be a Christian. First major red flag to me, but I ignore it because I don't mind discussing spirituality in general. And I wanted to finally have a good relationship with my dad after all of these years. It seems like he's genuinely changed for the better in a lot of ways. Fast forward to a phone conversation we had earlier this November. We're discussing religion, and I told an anecdote about how just recently some church members came to our door and I had a chat with them. I asked them some questions about their denomination, mostly just being nice. And after a while it was clear my husband and I would not be welcome at this particular church because of our relationship. My dad's response was, "Well, let me ask you this, son. Have you ever considered being a is wrong?" Nice and polite as you please. I don't even know what I thought at the time. I think my brain just short-circuited, and I said, "What? Now, of course not." And he dropped it immediately. But that stuck with me. Before that, he was saying, "I tell everyone about my gay son," as if it was a point of pride. But after that question that just comes across as him telling me what I want to hear, I waved it off, not really sure why other than me wanting to keep the peace and not look into the implications of what he said. Plus, he wasn't being openly bigoted, right? He says he's a Christian libertarian, so whatever his personal beliefs, he wouldn't want gay marriage outlawed, stuff like that. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I realized, after a while of running away from the conclusion, he had just openly disrespected me, my husband, and my marriage basically to my face. I confronted him on this in a later call, said that was not okay, that something was wrong if he thought he could just ask that, and I wouldn't be offended or hurt. What I got back was basically, "I accept you, but not your lifestyle." And then it got heated. I'll spare you the full details, but we went through the whole gamut. Biblical scripture, societal consequences, health, and I basically shot them all down in various ways. The whole time, his refrain was, "It's just a difference of opinion. We disagree on what's the problem? Why are you so worked up? This is America. We can have different opinions. Why are the gays always so upset?" Along with equivocation with people rejecting him and putting on a pity party or guilt trip, including me distancing myself from him as a kid when he was at his worst. Eventually, I was able to pull the following out of him after burrowing through his BS. "It's sad and painful that my son is gay and my lineage ends with me." I took my husband's last name too, which I'm sure is another sore point. Every gay person I knew back in the day said they were. After I said he wanted me to get divorced and become a Christian, you have it backwards. I was thinking that if you became a Christian, you'd reconsider being a. Paraphrased, forget scripture, forget societal consequences. This is just something I am against at a spiritual level. God's truth as I understand it, and informed by my own bad feelings during my own consensual home experiences. There it is. So, I told him, this isn't some intellectual exercise. This isn't debate club. This is our relationship as father and son. I told him he is clinging to his trauma and biases instead of trying to understand why this hurt me so much to hear from my father. I told him that he didn't just have to apologize. If he wanted a relationship with me, then he'd have to look inside and grow as a person, actually reflect and change his opinion on this because it's causing me pain to know that he's harboring all of this toxicity about something so important to me. The genie can't be put back in the bottle, and he's the one that opened it. I cut off his last random attempt at a guilt trip with, "How is this relevant to what I just said?" And he said, "Well, I have to throw out something. You're asking me to change my opinion, and that's not going to happen." So I said, if that's the truth, then there's nothing else to say. I restated my ultimatum, and he just said, "Okay, bye." And that's where it ended. I can tell I shook him up by putting my foot down. He's used to getting people to back down in this kind of situation. I'm a bit of a pushover with social anxiety, but I am realizing I also hate being in a relationship limbo, where I just feel like crap, while ignoring obvious signs that something is up. Him being polite about this doesn't make me feel better. It makes me feel worse. My husband and mom support my decision, but my own brain is constantly insecure about it. His voice saying, "It's just a disagreement. I still love you." My own saying, "You're the one that got worked up. You could have just let it go." But every fiber of my being is also saying that the situation wasn't healthy or sustainable for me. So, AITA for telling my father he has to actually change his opinion on if he wants to hear from me again? OP is not an AH for setting boundaries with his father. OP's father is an AH for questioning his identity and refusing to accept it. OP's reaction is 100% justified. She did nothing wrong. So I would rate OP's father 2.5 out of 5 and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Candid_Ideal 2789. Family agreed to have Christmas dinner a month ago, without me. Now I've made other plans, and they are mad at me. AITA? I have one daughter, and I am currently pregnant with my second child. At the beginning of this instance, my husband and I decided that we would be buying a house and moving many miles north by January 1st. My family has not taken this lightly, and I can't recall a moment when any of them have paused and expressed their happiness for my own family. They've expressed how they are affected by my decision to move, and I've had to convince them to be rational, or console them. At the end of October, my two siblings, mother and I were all together for an event. I left before anyone else, and I had spoken to them each many times since last being together. Fast forward to the week of 17 to 23, my mom suggested in a vague way that I host Christmas dinner at my house. I confirmed with her if she meant I host dinner, and she said yes. I was so excited. My mom does dinner every year in her small one-bedroom home and has to accommodate up to 7 people. It's like a 600 to 750 square feet home. So, I was eager to be able to help my mom finally. I have a much bigger home, and my mom works very long hours for her age, and I was gifted the responsibility of hosting dinner. Even with packing, moving over 870 miles in the winter, while pregnant, I wanted to have one really great, stress-free dinner for everyone before we moved. I spoke with my siblings about the suggestion and said I'd be happy to do so. I did not ask them for their input on having it at my place. In hindsight, I know that I did the same thing as them, but I was really excited for the opportunity. And at this point, I still had no idea about previous plans. I spoke about it in sibling group chat. No one objected. My youngest sibling said that they were unaware of the days their partner would have off for Christmas week, but really didn't give much to work with. I also suggested doing a non-traditional dinner like taken out at first, to alleviate work for me, but ultimately made a compromise for a more traditional dinner because my younger sibling spoke up. We would just need to agree that no leftovers would remain at my home. The last thing that was said was that my youngest sibling was not comfortable driving an hour to my house in the snow with their 3-month-old baby. I totally understood where they were coming from, so long story short, I just said, don't worry about making a decision. If you can come then, that's great, but I will figure out the rest with our family. I didn't want them to feel pressured to make a decision they weren't comfortable with. Then there was silence. 2 days after our group chat, I spoke with my mom and brought up a day that would work for dinner because my youngest sibling was unsure if they would be able to make it. That's when my mom told me that she received a call from them the same day of our group chat, complaining that they were all already in agreement to have dinner at their house, and that I wanted to do takeout. I was confused immediately, and it turned into frustration. Why didn't my siblings say anything about this previous arrangement to me? I feel like the opportunity was there to interject, but was not taken. So, my mom told me she would handle the dinner plans, but I was still upset, so I expressed myself to my youngest sibling. Long story short, I told them that it felt like I offended them and that I didn't want to hurt their feelings. It felt like I didn't include them or take into consideration what they wanted or needed, but that ultimately I was hurt and it felt like an attack on me because I had no idea about those previous plans, and that I was hurt that I wasn't given the opportunity to tell my side before they spoke to our mom. They called me back within an hour and were immediately defensive, accused me of being hostile, jumping to conclusions, barring them from talking to mom, for not approaching the situation right and making them look like the bad guy. I tried to clarify that this was all a misunderstanding and miscommunication, but we couldn't come to an agreement. And after they said that I made them look like the bad guy, they said they didn't tell me because they were waiting to see if I was moving January 1st or later. They were pissed that I hadn't told them yet and left them out. So, no one told me for 3 weeks. My mom suggested that I do dinner. I suggest to siblings to host dinner. No one communicates with me about it. Talks to mom instead, and she says she will handle talking to me. I was further not communicated with. I express how I feel to my sibling, and my siblings turns it around on me. Since then, I've asked my mom 3 times in 10 days, an update for dinner. Each time she has said she will have it figured out tomorrow. As of today, I've made plans elsewhere. My husband won't be here for Christmas. It's just me and my daughter. I couldn't wait anymore for them. My youngest said they didn't tell me for 3 weeks because they all have lives and can't drop everything for me, just for an invite. I told my mom today about my plans, and she is pissed and not talking to me. Maybe I'm leaving put relevant information like, each time something similar happens. Instead of talking to me and hashing it out, my siblings involve my mom. I do not tell my mom what goes on between us. I just tell her how I'm feeling and how for years I've been missing the relationship I had with my siblings. We had a falling out 4 years ago and things have been slowly getting better. But there will always be setbacks when I am involved, or I will be intentionally left out of events and gatherings, find out about missing it later, and just have to put on a smile and be happy for them. I don't know. Maybe it is me and I just needed to get this out of my head. So, Reddit, what do you think? I have asking myself for years, AITA. And I just try to accommodate, talk, and forgive, and I just don't know. At this point, I feel like I want to be wrong so that things can make sense to me. OP is not an AH for her reaction to her sibling's decision to have the Christmas dinner at their youngest sibling without telling her. OP's siblings are AHs for deliberately excluding OP from their plans. OP's reaction is 100% justified. She did nothing wrong. So, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for OP's siblings, they get 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from glittering-list-465, AITA. Because I won't become a daycare provider for my grandkids, I love being a mom and grandmother, and I've worked with kids most of my adult life. However, in recent years, my health has been wonky, and I've taken a step back to reevaluate what I'm going to do, and focusing on getting my health back on track. It's working, and I feel better now than I have in over a year at least. Recently, one of my kids asked me to become a daycare provider for them, that the state would pay me and they could work. The thing is, I don't want to. We have very different parenting styles, and the jobs they are looking at getting would not have a set schedule, so I would be on the hook for whatever they end up with. They also only brought this up after my husband and I went on a trip, like a once-in-a-lifetime trip, that they were upset over. They even had the audacity to say the money we spent could have helped pay for stuff for our grandkids. That really ticked me off because when each time our kids have added to their families, we have helped by giving them a check to cover 1 month of expenses, rent or mortgage, groceries, gas, car payments, other bills. Not to mention all the times we have bought groceries, baby items, medicine, dropped everything to help when asked. We also try to respect their boundaries and don't drop by unasked, don't kiss on the kids, etc. We are not stingy by any means. My other reason for not wanting to be a daycare provider, my husband work from home. There is nowhere in our home that is soundproof, and that clients wouldn't hear kids being kids. It wouldn't be fair to expect the kids to not make noise all day long. And we cannot afford for my husband to switch jobs. We've researched other daycares, and even early education programs. We are willing to help cover the cost for such, because we do understand how it would benefit the kids. We were told that's not acceptable, and we are just being selfish for not wanting the grandkids with us. I think it's selfish to think we should be the only option, and given a guilt trip for saying no and offering up other solutions. Any advice? AITA? Update! I shared some of the comments with all of my kids in a group chat. I think they needed to see that my husband and I already do a lot, probably more than most are able to, and that our boundaries need to be respected. My oldest apologized and admitted they were jealous of the cousins who have more time with their own grandparents. I pointed out how it seems great in theory, but how many times have the cousins had their parents miss important events of the kids because of it? I asked, what's more important to them? My babysitting, and most likely getting ill again, or being around for another 40 years. All the kids agreed they want me to be sticking around, and being the funky grandmother they think I'll be. I said that sounded a lot better to me too. My oldest also told me they have been in contact with different places and are researching their options. Time will tell how things go. Thank you for the support. I felt bad because I want to do it. I just know I'm not the right person for it. One last update, and I'm going to turn this off for comments tomorrow. My oldest almost died when she had her babies. She had twins, and her heart stopped working right along with needing multiple blood transfusions, and is still being impacted by its health-wise. She would have to ease back into working. Doctor's orders. This was clarified after another convo today. She's a fairly private person. We had no idea she was still having issues. We haven't done anything for her that we have done for the other kid, or won't do for the rest of our kids if they become parents. So, we now know she understands how health impacts stuff, and should understand that it's also why we made the offer on paying for childcare to begin with. We've offered to pay for someone to come in a few times a week and just help her in general, and she felt it was too violating on her space. We respected that. After today though, she now understands that we want to help her how we can, but that is doing it physically ourselves is not feasible. Thank you everyone. I appreciate the feedback. It's helped calm of us to see things from different perspectives. OP is not an AH for prioritizing her own needs. OP's children are AH for blaming OP and her husband for being selfish. OP's reaction is completely reasonable, so I would rate OP's children 2.5 out of 5 and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Sapphire Skies 32. AITA. For not taking care of my roommate's animals while she isn't home. I, 21F, have lived with my roommate for almost a year now, and we were friends before we moved in together. I had told her that I wanted a dog when we moved into our apartment and had been saving for one for a while. I had slowly started buying things for my future puppy, such as a crate and bowls and toys. Then my roommate, 21F at the time, decides all of a sudden that she too wanted a dog. I told her I didn't mind, but would like at least a year between getting both dogs at least, and that would give her time to look for a good breeder. However, I am a pushover, and she easily used me for my better nature, and took advantage of my situation to get her way. I had recently gone through something traumatic, and wanted to get my puppy sooner, due to being and feeling so lonely and going into a major depression. I told her to look for breeders as those dogs tend to be healthier, and are less likely to have problems that need to be accommodated. She, however, was no longer looking at breeds and possible fits for her lifestyle. But she was looking in shelters for a dog, and even when I reminded her not to look at shelters, she would blow me off and say I'm just looking, which turned to I'm just applying to see if they accept, which turned into they want me to go see her. She found a puppy about 3 months old that she absolutely fell in love with. Me being a people pleaser, had no idea how to say no to her, especially because I was and still am very disconnected from the world. She took advantage of my kindness and got the dog the day off, somehow also getting me to pay for the dog one that came almost a month before I got my own dog. And of course, she had nothing for this dog, not a single item in her name for this dog, but guess who did? Me, of course. I had been buying stuff for my dog for a while now, so I had plenty of things, and also was talked into buying more stuff for this dog, because my roommate was pretty much broke, and could not provide for this dog, effectively putting me into a good bit of debt that she would never pay back to me. So now she had gotten her dog almost a full month before I got mine, and she was using my supplies I had gotten for my dog. This sent me even deeper into my depression, and was really affecting me and our relationship. And this dog has a serious case of separation anxiety, like you can't even leave this dog in a room alone, or she barks her head off. Something my roommate has failed to train her out of. And got even worse when it came time for me to pick up my 8-week-old puppy. She would shift in her crate if the puppy was getting attention, and she wasn't. I couldn't have asked for a more perfect dog for myself, when I finally got my puppy. Eventually, when leaving for work, we decided to try putting her in my room to see if company with my dog while we were gone would calm her down and keep her from in her crate every day, which definitely toned her down from doing it every day. Fast forward to now, and it had been months of my roommate leaving her dog in my room to take care of, so she can spend weekends with her new BF at his parents' house, because he still lives with his parents quite a bit away from our apartment. So I would take care of her dog and cat while she was gone, so that they wouldn't be neglected while she was gone. This, however, has put a lot of extra stress onto me, and also made me feel guilty, as I feel I haven't been able to give my own dog the life he deserves, because we are too busy dealing with someone else's problem child. But of course, I couldn't bring up the courage to say anything about it, so I just allowed myself to suffer through it for months. Up until the last few days, I have finally told her that I don't want to watch her dog anymore, and that she needs to step up and stop neglecting her animals, because I will no longer be caring for them. This was a very hard step to take, because I feel bad for the animals, and I made a point to call her out on the fact she was neglecting her animals, but it has become too much for me. However, even as I write this, she has been gone for over a day. After I made it clear I would not be taking care of her animals anymore. She did not come home until literally just now, at 6:15 a.m., and she had been gone since the night before, leaving her dog in her crate all day, which I haven't really bothered to check, because it felt so good to finally be rid of the responsibility of her animals, and it was very healing to finally take down the extra crate in my room and free up some space. There are a lot of things me and my roommate don't agree on, and it has definitely changed my view of her. And I personally no longer see her as a friend, but I continue to treat her with respect and keep things cordial. TLDR, my roommate got a dog she couldn't handle and leaves her in my room while she goes on weekend getaways to her boyfriend's place while I stay home, and finally called her out for neglecting her animals and stopped taking care of them due to my own stress. OP is not an AH for refusing to help her roommate with taking care of her dog. Simply, it is not OP's responsibility. If someone wants to have a pet, they must have a plan and resources for taking care of the animal. OP's roommate is an AH for blaming her for being selfish. As for scores, I would rate OP's roommate 2.5 out of 5, and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from responsible_crow3502. AITA for yelling at a child? My sister, 30F, asked me, F, for a favor to take photos of food for the cafe that she is working in. In return, she told me that they would provide us food. The cafe is new and will have their soft opening for a couple of days, so they needed someone to take photos of their menu. I agreed because the cafe is just nearby, and it would be nice to help my sister from time to time. My assistant, 26M, and I got there on time, and we proceeded to set up our equipment on one of the tables. My sister was there and other employees. The boss, mid-30s, was not hard to talk with, and he has this relaxing vibe that made us at ease and not nervous about the shoot. During our photo shoot, another guy came in with his family, and apparently he is one of the bosses of the cafe, late 40s. He brought his wife and 2 children, an infant and a 6 years old. While we are taking photos of the food, my sister has his own food that she is munching on. She went to the counter for a minute, and this child stole food from her bag, and I just told my sister what the child did, cause I DK what to do. So, my sister scolded the child and said, "Princess, not her real name, why are you stealing food? Did your parents teach you that?" In an assertive tone. My sister then proceeded on telling me that we should also scold the kid when she is giving us trouble with the photo shoot and have a tone cause that is the only way the child will listen. I got hesitant at first, but the parents don't say or do anything about the way my sister talks to their child, so I thought that it's normal to them. Time goes by and the child is becoming more harder to handle. She would steal food from our setup and asked her politely to not touch anything from the table that has a lot of cameras and lights on it. She is also throwing tantrums every 15 mins for not getting what she wants, like wanting juice, but only giving her water. She would yell and say, "I don't like water, you." Then my sister yelled too and copying the child's tantrums. Again, the parents did not say anything or do anything to the child or my sister, so I really thought that it's normal behavior among them. And since my sister already gave me permission to scold the child, I will blast my heart out the second this child does something again. The photo shoot is almost over, and we were just waiting for the last dish. We were eating while waiting, and our setup is just on standby. The setup has a drink on it for a background element, and we fixed the camera angle with a tripod. The child is reaching out for the drink on our setup again, and I told her, "No, you can't grab or move anything in this table. Go to your parents for food, they have pasta." The child said, "But I don't like pasta." Then proceeded to throw another tantrum and shouting, "I'm hungry. Why isn't anyone wants to give me food?" The child proceeded on grabbing my tripod with the camera on it, and I immediately jumped to my sit and yelled at her, "Do not touch my stuff." Again, no reaction from the parents. So I copied my sister. I told her, "Will you be able to pay that if you broke it?" I'm very protective on my gear because I won't be able to replace it ever when it breaks. My camera is no longer in the market, and it has a sentimental value since it is a birthday gift. The child is yelling again, and I started yelling with her just like what my sister did. Again, no reaction or action from the parents. The child started kicking the tripod, and I began to really shout at the child. She told me that she hated me, and I copied what she told me back at her. The child is yelling, "Help me, help me, help me." But again, no reaction from the parents. An employee escorted the child and the mother's wife followed. After a couple of minutes of us finishing our food, the child's father, my sister's boss, confronted me. He told me that she doesn't like the way I talk to his daughter, the way I yell and shouted at her. Then my assistant asked him, "Why didn't you talk to your daughter then?" Then he said, "Well, we own this place," so insinuating that they can do whatever they want. Then the boss asked, "How about you? Will you scold your child in public?" Then my assist said, "Well, when I was young, my parents would smack me if I did something that I shouldn't, so yeah." Then I told him that I only shouted at her daughter because I'm protecting my gear. Then he proceeded to tell us, "I can replace those 10 times more." Then I asked him, "What about the sentimental value? You cannot replace that." But the only thing that is coming out of his mouth is basically, "I have money. I can do whatever I want." They told us that the child was traumatized and doesn't want to go back to the cafe anymore. At this point, my memory is a blur because I am overridden with emotions that I am trying to suppress. All my life I have been stepped on and spitted on, so something switched in me when that child is disrespecting my work and equipment, a job that I did for free for my sister, and if what he is saying is true, why not pay for my fee then? Why make my sister ask for me to do the job for free? We still finished the job and proceeded with our life for a couple of weeks. My sister then quit the job because they are treating her like a slave, with a 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. shift with no day offs. Then this happened. Our older cousin, who is the landlord of the cafe, heard about what happened and told us that the boss wants to sue me for child abuse. I have to say sorry for him not to press charges. Did I really up? The one time I stand up for myself, then this happened? OP is not an AH for yelling. Rather, OP's boss is an AH for not taking care of her child and threatening OP of child abuse. OP's slightly harsh behavior was a response to her boss's child's teasing behavior. OP did nothing wrong. She was just trying to protect herself and her equipment. So, I would rate OP 0 out of 5, and OP's boss 2.5 on the AH scale. AITA for cutting ties with my parents. Because they support my brother, who my daughter. I come from a big family. Me, 35F, and all my siblings, 3 brothers and 2 sisters, are close, love and support each other deeply. Relationship with parents has been active. I see them often. I have 4 kids, 3 girls and a boy. My family has been involved heavily in my kids' lives from the beginning. It isn't uncommon for a sibling to take my older 2 kids for an outing, or even for a weekend. They'll do things like skating, surfing, rock climbing, hiking, trail running, camping, biking, etc. It's been really amazing to have my siblings be so involved with my kids. Things really crashed down almost 3 months ago when one of my children told me that my brother, her uncle, 37M, abused her on an outing. I'm not going into detail, but it was severe. She told me not long after it happened. I called the police and pressed charges. It was a stressful investigation. He was arrested, and we are going through a criminal court process. I told my sisters and one of my brothers the same day I made the initial report to police, but I kept it a secret from my parents because I didn't want to risk the offender being tipped off. That first month was emotional hell for me. I went through many conflicting emotions. I started off with rage, but I eventually fell into pleading for it to not be true and mourning this person I thought I knew. Even asking myself, is there a possibility that he has some kind of brain tumor? This isn't the person I know. But I will say that though I was going through an internal emotional roller coaster, I never lost sight of my action plan. I was very focused on the investigation. I mean, my actions were a stark contrast of what I was feeling. When it came to an action plan, I was a machine, and I set the stage for an arrest to be made. Although the arrest was my goal, it was still devastating for me. I had a breakdown that day. I got the call that he was arrested. I had a panic attack. Even though what he did was heinous, I still struggled with imagining him in jail and scared, knowing he just lost everyone and everything. Seeing his name, stats, and charges on the county jail record online was a step further into making it real. It took a little while for my emotions to match 100% with my action plan. I'm so glad that my emotional feelings now match the goal I've been pursuing. I have mostly, if not fully, processed that my brother is a monster, and I no longer have any lingering affection for him. As soon as I got the call from the detective that he had been picked up and on the way to the jail, I went straight to my parents to tell them before my brother or his GF could call them. They believed my daughter immediately, and understandably were broken-hearted about their son. They are so hurt for their grandchild. However, they've made it clear they will not leave their son, saying, "I cannot abandon any of my children. I just don't have it in me." The morning after the arrest, they bailed him out of jail and then got him an attorney so he would have better defense than a public defender. It's been about 7 weeks since the arrest. Since then, they have kept out of the court process and don't talk about it. They don't even want to think about it. I've been trying to understand their point of view. He is their child too. I've gone through my own process of screaming and crying how he could do this to me, to my child. It was incredibly hard to picture this person I loved and trusted my whole life as being this monster. I get it. I understand how hard it has to be for my parents to fully accept this reality. The offender has war-related PTSD and depression, and he discontinued psych meds abruptly. He is claiming this is what caused his behavior. I looked into these meds and asked several mental health professionals about this claim. My takeaway is that it was BS. My parents, on the other hand, are buying into it, that this is a mental illness and not his fault. They're in denial. My siblings and their children have easily but painfully decided to cut the perp out of their life, so I don't have any worries there. Their support solely lies on my daughter and I, and what I need to do. The first thing I said to my sisters when they answered my video call was, "Please don't leave me," because I really didn't know who could stand by my side as I prosecuted our brother. And all of my siblings have stood by my side through every step. I don't think I would have succeeded without their support, help, advice. However, my parents have made it clear they are not cutting him out of their life. They think they can somehow support both of their children through this. They're old, lonely, and I acknowledge they're suffering their family falling apart. I know the emotional toll this is taking on them, and maybe having to handle emotions so deep at their age is too much. They have told me that I did the right thing and that I did what I had to do. They say they support me, and they are so torn up about what my daughter suffered. They keep saying, "What happened to him? What happened to him to be like this?" They're having a hard time, and it's really a devastation for everyone. My mom told me she is depressed. My parents look like they've aged so much in the past few weeks. To be honest, I was terrified that they would have heart attacks when I told them what was happening. I was mentally preparing to have to plan funerals while pursuing a conviction. My parents aren't perfect, but they've always supported me. I was a teen mom. They helped with childcare so I could go through school and work. My kids are bonded to them. I seem to be the only person seriously considering dropping them. I don't want to cut my parents out in their last years and take that away from my children, but I can't stand the idea of being connected to anyone who remains connected to that monster. Even the victim wants to see her grandparents knowing they won't abandon their son. She doesn't like that they won't cut him out, but she said she is okay to keep seeing her grandparents. Am I even the slightest bit wrong in cutting them out, even if it means severing it for my kids too? Is it awful to abandon your elderly parents? I've been raised with a strong duty to family mindset, that you take care of your parents as they age. Everyone in my life says they don't know. They understand both my feelings and my parents' limitations. Would it be better to give them an ultimatum, me and my family, or him? I'm so scared if I add any more to the stress on them, it will really kill them. If the victim wants to stay connected to them, should I suck it up and continue with the contact? At what point am I being selfish and unreasonable against everyone else's feelings? Just wanted to add that my primary focus is about my daughter. I'm not mentioning her really because my question isn't about her, and her condition isn't up for discussion. I don't want the offender or his supporting fiancé to read things about how my child is doing or what is going on with my family at home, considering the active case. By the way, my brother's fiancé is the only person who called my daughter a liar, stating that I would have some indication that he was like this. There would be red flags. This comes from a girl who was raised by a therapist, and she called my daughter a liar even after I told her that there was a recorded confession. There's no question about it. Disgusting. Just be assured that everything is being handled at home for the victim. My husband and I got her. My family is suffering, but we are strong. There's no confusion about that, and what needs to be done. We are fighting like hell for justice, even if I'm screaming and dying inside the whole way. My confusion is only about cutting my parents out of my family's life for maintaining contact with the offender. And believe me, he is guilty. I don't even need a conviction to know it. My parents also know he is guilty. OP is not an AH. Rather, her parents are AH who are supporting their criminal son. It is really insane to have such selfish parents. They are morally perverted and bad people, both for the family and society. They are supporting a heinous crime just because it was committed by their son. As for scores, I would rate OP's criminal brother 5 and OP's parents 4.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. And OP gets nothing. Let's now jump onto the next story from Nebular Reptile. AITA for getting mad at my boyfriend for not wanting a full-time job? Hello everyone. This is going to be a lot, but thank you to all who read. My 25F 24M boyfriend of 5 years lost his dad in surgery about 2 years ago. We both currently live with his 47F mom. Before then, he hasn't really been one to hold down a steady job. He really dislikes working for others, and so then has always done things like Uber Eats or last-mile delivery services since then with my car. During that time, he has used my vehicle for a majority of the time, adding about 30 to 40k miles to it in about 2 years. The thought about the wear and tear on my car makes my stomach churn, but I try not to think about it. Anyway, he has acquired his CDL and passed the class this year. Although he feels like he didn't get enough class time, he has looked for jobs but hasn't been able to find any. This is the part that I have a hard time with. He is rather picky and has told me that he only applies for jobs that he considers are worthwhile pay and only local. Mind you, he has zero experience to show for it. I beg and beg for him to apply for regional at the minimum, although I don't understand why he wouldn't apply for national, because we have no kids and no other obligations that would need him to stay here. The pay is much better, but I digress. He says he can't picture himself working and living in a truck with someone else, and that he'd rarely be home to enjoy that pay. Also, he worries about his mom and doesn't want to leave her alone. Okay, fine. Half a year has passed since he's acquired his CDL, and there's still no news. He'll go to interviews, but won't call for a follow-up. Everything came to a head this past week. My mum was able to purchase a house and had plans to rent it out. However, she has extended this opportunity to us and gave us a chance to move out of his mum's and into that house. We would only be responsible for a fraction of the rent utilities. I spoke to him seriously about it, expressing how important it is for us to be adults now. Once I brought up that he'd need to work full-time, his eyes almost popped out of his head. He genuinely thought we would be able to slide by on him being part-time, although I was going to work full-time. He genuinely didn't expect me to expect the same from him. He then decided to tell me his plans about starting a YouTube channel with his buddy, and that when it starts making revenue, he will quit his job. I lost it there and started crying and telling him that it's so far-fetched, and I hate how he's banking on the fact that this will take off, that it's a great dream to have, but realistically not possible. I called him delusional, and I told him I don't believe at all that it's going to happen, so that he needs to get that idea out of his head and start acting like an adult and coming to terms with working a full-time job. He got mad at me because I didn't believe in him, and that he can't believe I would say such things. At the end of it, he said that he's willing to work full-time, but again, if this takes off, he will quit. If not, he will work full-time. But I'm afraid the damage is done. I think I realized then that I was dating a man-child and that I can't see him in the same light anymore. I asked for a break there and asked for him to secure a job, before I can go any further. He cried and begged for me to wait for an interview that's coming up and for me to stay. I'm also partly fed up because he has promised me marriage, but hasn't saved any money for a ring. The thing is though, he treats me so amazingly, and like I'm the princess of his whole world. He has always been very sweet, and anything that I would want or need, he finds a way to get it for me. He's the most patient man I've ever met, and he makes me feel so loved. I don't know if I'm being impatient or not understanding. He tells me that ever since he lost his dad, he has had a lack of motivation, but he doesn't believe in therapy. He has had them before his dad passed, and he found the experience awkward. Seems interested in group talk/therapy, but won't take the steps to join one. At the end of the day, I just want him to grow up and start adulting, but I'm stuck and I don't know what to do. OP is not an AH for wanting her boyfriend to take responsibilities and contribute to their shared future. Not OP, but OP's boyfriend is an AH for living in the paradise of fools and relying on unrealistic plans and making no efforts for his future. As for scores, I would rate OP's boyfriend 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Lilid Bol. AITA for screaming at my 34F parents, 63M and 62F, for something that happened 20 years ago? I am the middle child of 3. Anna, 41F, Adrian, 28M, and me, Alicia, 34F. All fake names. My oldest sister is currently battling cancer, and she won't make it. The doctors have been clear that she is in her last months. I am her primary caregiver. I take her to appointments, to palliative care, checks, everything. I also deal with her mood swings and withdrawals, the physical assistance she needs, curing her wounds, all the drill. She has 2 kids, 13M, 10F, that have been raised by my parents, 63M and 62F. As her boyfriend, 36M, never really wanted to take care of the kids. So when they were 1 year old, she just dropped them at my parents' place one day and never took them back. She sees them regularly though. My brother Adrian, on the other hand, lives with the girlfriend in our hometown. I am generally helping them with anything, sometimes even paying vet bills if they're short on cash. I am also the mother of a 3M child, and we live with my partner, 45M, and my stepson, 16M. I WFH full-time, and also do 90% of the house chores as my partner works out of town, so his working and travel hours are long. We live in a medium-sized town, and although the place has all basic services, the university is in the capital, around 100 kilometers away. So if you want to pursue high studies, you need to move either there or somewhere farther. Anna had the opportunity to move there for studies when she was 18, but a couple years later she decided to drop off and came back to our hometown. She has been living here since then. I, on the other hand, despite having a score of 8.6 out of 10 when I finished high school, could not attend university because back in the day my parents were not in good economic terms, and we didn't have the means. I decided to take professional formation and I did web development. I also took online university education, and I am just one course away from being a certified practitioner for infant speech. Overall, I did study, and with good results, even if I couldn't make it to university. I am working on the IT field, and it goes fairly good to me. My brother did start his PF education, but did not finish it. He works harvesting the fields nowadays, as we live in a rural area, and that's the type of work you can access to if you are not a qualified professional. On Sunday, I was visiting my parents when we were just generally speaking about studies and the past. My dad suddenly spilled that they did in fact have the money to send me to university 20 years ago, but that they didn't think I would make it. The reason? My sister Anna dropped off and quoting him, "She was a very smart child, so if she couldn't, there was no way you could." My entire past shattered to pieces. I had always made peace with not having a higher education because my family simply couldn't afford it. Just to learn 20 years later that they could, they just didn't think I deserved the chance. Their excuse was that I had to study a lot to go through high school, so I wouldn't last at university. The reason I studied a lot was because I wanted to secure a vacancy in a high-demand career on my preferred university, hence my 8.6 out of 10 final score. They shut down this by restating that Anna and Adrian had always been the smart children, not me. I left their house shortly after when things had heated up, and I was literally screaming at them. When I made it home, I told my partner, 45M, and also that I was not going back to visit them until they at least call me first. I didn't even expect an apology, but they to reach out. He said I was overreacting, as it is something that happened 20 years ago, and I should let the past go. Now I am doubting myself. For me, this happened on Sunday, not 20 years ago. And it is very painful to know how my parents think about me, especially when I have thrived on my field, and I am also taking care of the family all the time. But I don't know. Am I the for how I reacted and what I expect on this situation, or are my feelings justified? OP is 100% justified for her frustration. However, screaming is not a solution. It is not only about just the past. OP's parents' choices are affecting OP life till now. As for scores, I would rate OP's parents 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the scale. Let's now move on to the next story from original_wall A by _779. AITA for reminding my stepsister that she is not my father's daughter. I am a woman and I am 28 years old, so I left my parents' house long time ago. I have my own house, a job and a fiancé to whom I officially got engaged 3 months ago. My parents divorced when I was 16, but they have maintained civil contact, and I have good relationships with both of them. My father gets with a woman 5 years ago who already had a daughter. She is now 22. My mother gets with a man 7 years ago, and he have 2 sons, 16 and 19 now. I get along pretty well with my stepbrothers, and have always tried to involve them in activities with me. Going to the shops, playing video games or board games together, or even just taking them out for a meal. They are good kids and I enjoy their company, so I tried to bond with them, and luckily everything is good between us. I tried to do the same with my stepsister, but things never went very well. From what I know, she has had several problems since her father abandoned her, and she still goes to therapy for it. So she is not the friendliest person in the world. I tried for a while to understand her, and try to have at least a civil relationship, but it didn't work, so I gave up after the first year. Her mother is a good person, and has apologized several times for her daughter's behavior, begging me not to hold a grudge against her, and I have tried to do so despite everything. Just to give you an idea, my stepsister has abandonment syndrome, diagnosed by her therapist, and is very clingy with her mother, my father, and her boyfriend. My father believes that her hateful behavior towards me is because she sees me as some kind of obstacle that can take my father away from her at any time. He has tried to mediate the situation, talk to her, and have some conversations with her therapist too about it, and we have actually made some progress over the years. Now she is no longer openly against me, and we can even have casual conversations without her giving me the cold shoulder or aggressive responses. However, she still tries to do some spite, even if subtly, to keep my father's attention only on her. I have my job who took away a lot of my time, so I can't really spend much time with my dad, and we mostly talk through calls and texts. But apparently, she has had a meltdown in the past when she saw him reply to a text from me while he was with her. I admit that it's something that bothers me. I can't help it. But luckily my father is able to manage things by giving her the security that he won't abandon her without reducing his time for me. The problem is now, my fiancé and I have decided on a wedding date for the end of May. We told our close relatives 2 weeks ago, and we will soon start making official invitations and sending them to everyone. 2 days ago, while I was at my dad's house and we were talking about when to make the appointment to go look at the wedding dress, I will bring my dad, my mom, my grandma, and my best friend, so I am trying to find a day that works for everyone. My stepsister butts into the conversation, telling my dad that she is planning on taking a family trip with him and her mom. My father was a little taken aback by that request in the middle of another conversation, and simply said that it was fine with him and that they would organize it later, but she immediately said that she had already thought about where to go and when. Apparently, she wants to go to Thailand at the end of May. Yes, the very week that I am supposed to get married. I got annoyed, but I didn't say anything. It was my father who managed the conversation and told her that she had to choose another date because he had to attend my wedding that week. Let's be clear. I also invited her and her mother. I didn't leave them out, and her mother also seemed happy to have been included. Well, the conversation escalated quickly, and she started having an emotional breakdown, accusing my dad of playing favorites, that he didn't love her, that he was leaving her behind, and other things like that. My dad was calm and firm the whole time, explaining to her that she couldn't make such a demand, and expect him to agree, so she started lashing out at me. When she yelled at me, "Why does he always have to choose you?" I lost my temper and replied, "Of course he chooses me. I'm his daughter. Who the hell are you?" She froze, shocked, and then ran to her room to cry. Well, I felt a bit bad right after I said that because I know her problems, but I can't deny that her behavior really bothered me. I mean, what did she expect? That my father would skip his own daughter's wedding to go on vacation with her? A vacation that we all know she wanted to take the week of my wedding on purpose? My father was also a bit upset by my words, and I apologized to him, telling him that I felt sorry for her and her problems. But I had tolerated her behavior for so long that this was the last straw. He said he understood me and would try to work things out with her, but it was clear that I had hurt him too with my words. I admit I was harsh, but I don't feel guilty for saying it to her. It was the truth after all. But should I have had more consideration for her, letting my dad solve the problem without saying anything? When I think about my father's eyes full of pain, I feel really a jerk. OP is not the AH for clarifying to her stepsister that she was just her stepsister. However, OP's response was a little harsh, and she could have handled the situation better. So, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for OP's stepsister, I would rate her 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale for manipulating OP's father and trying to sabotage OP's wedding by scheduling a foreign trip in the week when OP was getting married. Let's now jump on to the next story from Wolfbite 4444. AITA. Stepmom comments on food portions and shames us, so I spoke up at Thanksgiving. I, 35F, thought I set a healthy boundary on Thanksgiving with my stepmom, 59F. But I am starting to feel like an AH and I would like some input, because if I am the AH, I want to hold myself accountable. I need to provide a little background here for people to understand the situation. My stepmom has been around since I was 5-ish, and she has a daughter that is 2 years younger than me. Stepmom had an eating disorder that was so bad, it caused her heart problems and all sorts of health problems. She is no longer bulimic, but still has an unhealthy relationship with food. I remember when we were teenagers, my stepmom was calling herself fat because she could no longer fit into a size 0 anymore. This led to my younger sister crying because my sister wore a size 3, and that must mean she is fat too. My sister and I grew up hating our bodies and feeling extremely insecure. Stepmom would only give me backhanded compliments like, "Ugh, I hate you. You are so pretty. Just get out of my house. We can't have someone that pretty here." And I would always just sort of laugh it off and roll my eyes. She has said this exact same thing to me since my teenage years and still does it in my 30s. My sister now has 3 children, and she has told her mother that she is not to comment on body image, food portions, or anything negative about herself in front of the children or to the children. Stepmom still makes comments under her breath like, "Wow, that's a lot of food." Or, "Are you sure you can even eat all that?" Or just looks at someone's plate with judgment in her eyes. 2 weekends ago, the youngest child ate all of her chicken and veggies and went to the kitchen where her mom was doing the dishes. She asked her mom for more mac and cheese, and her mom served her 2 scoops. When the child came back to the table, she said, "Oh my God, insert name," while looking at the child's plate. This pissed me off. Nobody heard her but me and the other children, because the guys were watching the football game. Fast forward to Thanksgiving. My sister and her kids were out of town. Lucky them. It was my dad, stepmom's sister, my boyfriend, and a family friend. Her sister got up to get a second serving, and when she did, stepmom said, "OMG, insert name." I could no longer bite my tongue, especially because I had a glass of wine before dinner. So, I spoke up and said, "You know, Dash, when you make comments about how much other people are eating or their portion sizes, it can be very hurtful and comes across very rudely. You did it to Dash last weekend, and you have done it to other family members in the past. Please stop making those comments because it can be damaging, especially to the children." She didn't say a word, and my dad quickly changed the subject. We moved on and enjoyed the rest of the night. I thought a boundary had been established and she would stop with her BS, since she was called out and aware of it now. Boy, was I wrong. Yesterday, I received a call from stepmom while my dad wasn't home with her. I answered the call, not thinking anything of it, and she proceeded to tell me how rude and uncalled for it was for me to call her out in front of everyone, that I owe her the respect of speaking to her privately if I have an issue, that I should not have ruined Thanksgiving with my unnecessary reaction to what she said. She then proceeded to tell me she never makes comments about people's food. I told her that is not true. She had done it the other day to her granddaughter, and has done it countless times to other family members. She then claimed, "When I say, oh my God, I just mean like, oh my God. They must love the food so much that they are going back for seconds, and I take it as the ultimate compliment. You are wrong. You shouldn't have said anything." This pissed me off. To full-on deny it and then twist it around on me? So I responded, "No, you aren't insinuating that with your comments and tones. You make these comments probably not realizing how it comes across." I politely responded to what you said, pointing out that it's rude and hurtful. You said it in front of everyone, as you always do, so I responded to it in front of everyone. Maybe you don't realize how damaging it is, but your past comments gave Sister and me a lot of body image issues, and we're not going to sit here and allow you to pass that on to Sister's kids. She was silent. Then she started crying. With my history, I would never do that. Is this an emotional manipulation tactic? IDK. But I said, "Listen, I won't apologize for establishing a healthy boundary and calling someone out on their unhealthy behavior. Maybe it was the wrong time, wrong place, but I am so tired of biting my tongue and being a doormat to avoid one of your emotional outbursts." Another point for history: when you try to point something out or correct her on something, she will throw up her hands, cause a fit, say something like, "Well, I guess I'm just an idiot," or something to that effect, and storm off and hide in a bedroom. She doesn't have the ability or maturity to regulate her own emotions. Everyone walks on eggshells around her, and we always have. Everyone got used to not speaking up for themselves to avoid the drama. After I mentioned trying to avoid one of her emotional outbursts, she responded saying, "I have been working so hard on not going off and overreacting. I am trying. You should have pulled me aside and said something." I wanted to end the conversation right then and there, so I said, "Maybe it was the wrong time, wrong place, but my intent was to bring attention to this behavior, and I wanted witnesses around us, so my words couldn't be misconstrued and turned against me. But I stand by what I said. I have a busy day, and I am trying to get out the door. If you want to talk to Sister about this further, and get your daughter's input on how this has affected us all in the past, feel free to." And I hung up the phone. It felt good to stand my ground, but now I have feelings of guilt. My sister is sticking up for me. Her mom hasn't called her yet, but my sister thanked me for sticking up for everyone. When her mom calls and asks, "Did I/do I do this?" Sister is planning on being honest and calling her out and giving her examples from the past. Even so, I feel guilty. I feel like an AH. I feel like I should keep the peace and bite my tongue and just continue to walk on eggshells. I don't want to cause drama. I want to continue to see my dad regularly without the awkwardness of his wife. Was I rude to call it out right then and there? Do I feel guilty because I am not used to setting healthy boundaries with family? AITA. OP is not an AH for addressing a long-standing issue of her stepmom's behavior that always crosses boundaries. However, addressing it publicly might seem a little bit off. Whatever, OP did nothing wrong. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 and OP's stepmom 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. AITA. Half my neighbors don't like me, and I genuinely don't think I've deserved it. Moved into a new neighborhood about a year ago with my girlfriend. I am pretty introverted and tend to keep to myself. It's not like the days before the internet when everyone talked to their neighbors constantly. 35M. Neighbor 1. While moving into the house, she, approximately late 40s, early 50s single mom, stood in her front yard and just stared at my dad and I. It was so bizarre. He's friendlier than me and tried to make small talk, and I waved, but she didn't respond at all. Fast forward, her and I did not talk for about 10 months until one day I was putting in a new parking space. I got tired of the single-lane driveway, so just put an extra spot in. I did it nicely too, and even lined it with timber, just listening to music and tamping things down when she finally came out and stared at me again. I said hi after about 10 minutes of it. "What are you doing with that sod?" she asked. "I'm starting a garden, so I'll compost it," I responded. She then proceeded to ignore what I said and tell me she has some low spots in her yard and directed me where to put it for her. I kept it to myself, but this made me furious. The audacity. I just responded, "I'll let you know if I have any left afterwards," and never talked to her again. Now she will stand at her side of the fence and stare at me in my yard. Neighbor 2 kept giving me the newspaper for free. I don't really want it, but didn't want to offend him, and figured I could just compost it anyway. I learned that this neighbor does nice things for a lot of people on the block, so he can get things from them. For instance, he takes care of one of the neighbor's house's snows, so he can use their garage for storage. Our first snowy day, he asked to use my snowblower. It was brand new, and I didn't know how to use it yet, so I told him I needed some time. He wanted to use it for his driveway and 3 other people's driveways, which seemed like a big ask, but I didn't care and just asked him to come by later. When I've watched a couple videos and figured it out, he never came back and instead had a guy plow it with a truck. I said, "Well, okay then." But then he stopped waving to me and stopped giving me newspaper. He will literally go back in his house to avoid saying hi if he sees me walking my dog. It's not an issue, but it's like, okay, 2 neighbors hate me. Am I doing something wrong here? Was I supposed to bring the snowblower over to his house and knock on his door with it? Neighbor 3. She was very nice when we moved in. A little too nice, really. She brought out a huge box of dog treats and waved us over while on a dog walk one day. Then she asked us 100, increasingly intrusive, questions while giving my dog a treat every minute or so. Where'd we move from? Where do we work? Names. Even asked if we planned to have kids. I wanted to tell her to stop giving my dog treats but didn't want to be rude. The whole time she had a seemingly aggressive dog barking from the garage. It's worth mentioning that my dog is very well trained. She is actually off-leash certified for our state and could easily walk her around the neighborhood off-leash with no issues. But we don't. Some people don't like dogs and get nervous, and I totally it. She does not chase animals. Unfortunately, a while back, she got attacked by another dog at the dog park. Now she can be a little unpredictable if she gets cornered by other dogs. It's not a very common thing, but I stay aware of it. Anyway, the lady actually works at the local grocery store, and whenever we see her, she waves and says hi. Same when we're out and about walking the dog. Well, about a month or so ago, while walking my dog, she accidentally opened the door, and I learned that she actually has 2 large dogs cooped up in her garage when they came charging towards me and my 35-pound dog. She let out these halves-assed, "Oh, hey, come back," and I started yelling, "Please get your dogs, please get your dogs." They ran right up to my leashed dog, and she started growling and backing up, but they got right in her space, and she tried to bite one of them, but missed. Then they both finally ran back to their owner. Finally, the owner just had them come back in the garage and closed the door with her and the dogs inside. No apology, nothing. I didn't say anything but was fuming. My dog was traumatized again. She ran home immediately and has been scared to walk ever since. I have to carry a pocket full of treats and ease her just to walk a few houses down before she realizes and pulls me all the way home. The kicker? She doesn't say hi to us or wave anymore. One night my dog was sniffing her mailbox, and she turned the outside light on and came out just to stare at me. I waved, but no response, just staring back. I seriously don't get it. What am I doing wrong here? Neighbor 4. This happened last week. I was in the military a while back and worked night shift. We were required to wear these reflector belts. You can probably Google image if you're curious. I spent 8 years in the military and never once had a close call. They are very reflective. Never almost hit by a car, a truck, an airplane, nothing. Mind you, this was worn over camouflage. I wear this belt like a sash when I walk my dog at night. Neighbor 4 was pulling into his driveway and quite nearly almost hit me. No blinker, and even after he saw us, he didn't stop and wait. He still pulled into the driveway. It was a seriously stupid move, but I bit my tongue. I had a lot I wanted to say, but I didn't want to be confrontational. Enough of my neighbors hate me already. But then he got out of his truck and said, "I couldn't see you 'cause you're wearing all black," and it set me off. I stopped and said, "You didn't see the reflector belt?" To which he responded, "You're wearing all black." I was wearing a blue sweater and khakis, but it's dark, so everything looks black. My dog's harness has a reflective outline as well. I am, but you didn't see the reflector belt? I repeated. Well, yeah, but under that you're wearing all black, he said. I really wanted to get into it. This guy could have killed or seriously injured me if I was just a few feet further in the walk. But yet again, I bit my tongue. On the tip of my tongue was, it was also hard to tell you were going to turn since it seems like your blinker doesn't work. But I just said, oh, I see, to his all-black comment, and I continued the walk. Yet another sour interaction. Ugh! It's worth pointing out I do have good relationships with some of my neighbors. We still wave at every car in the neighborhood, whether we can tell who it is or not. And one of my neighbors will actually come out of his house and help me with things if he ever sees me working on something. There's another dog walker my dog likes to play with when we see them too. I'm just constantly thinking of that saying, if everyone around you is an maybe you are the and wondering what I'm doing wrong to make so many of my neighbors hate me. OP is not an AH for setting his boundaries. OP's neighbors are AHs for being unreasonable and rude in their actions. OP's reaction is 100% justified to avoid any conflict with his neighbors. So, I would rate OP's neighbors 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from unable_tree_5775. AITA for breaking up with my boyfriend who wanted to stay in the relationship because he was happy. A few weeks ago, I, 14F, decided to break up with my boyfriend, 14M. The relationship lasted for 2 months. We both enjoyed the relationship for the time it lasted. But in the end, it was all too much for me to handle anymore, hence why I broke up with him. Allow me to paint the picture of what the relationship started off like. I went to the same primary school as him, but I left in year 5 due to bullying. In year 5, he also joined the same self-defense school I go to, which my dad owns and is the head instructor of. We took a while to become friends. We started off hating each other. After I left the school, we slowly became closer to each other and became good friends. We held this status until recently, when we found out about how we both felt. The relationship started when he confessed to liking me, and then I admitted to him too. A week after that, we attended a friend's birthday party at a theme park, and we wandered off and called it a date, despite it not really being one. From here, things seemed to get better in the relationship, and it was like I was living in a dream. After that, we began to hold hands, hug, and lay down on each other, and he was my first kiss. But things quickly escalated from kissing to making out, which for my age group is rather full on. I'd also like to mention that he was highly respected by my dad, who had actually gone and hired him to become an assistant instructor to teach young children how to defend themselves. A few of my other friends are also assistant instructors, along with myself. My boyfriend was about 3.5 years experienced, so he knew his stuff. He was well known throughout the gym and was not only a highly respected instructor, but student as well. Now, for me to explain everything. Whilst we were in a happy relationship that we throughout would last a lifetime, it obviously didn't. Soon after we began our relationship, he began giving attitude to my dad and the gym manager, whom I view as an amazing mentor. Our nice messages in the evening ended up with him telling me how much he hated the manager, and he just wished he could talk back because she is really rude, as well as how his training had been robbed from him because my dad continued to partner him up with new kids. Now, the manager can be a little bit bossy at times. But rude? My friends and I can all clarify that she only ever gets mad at people when they have done something wrong. I can clarify that he was quite frequently being partnered up with new kids, that he would spend the lesson teaching them rather than actually training. On another note, which is somewhat related to this, we would both go into the locker room, a confined space with no cameras, due to the fact it would breach privacy, to be intimate with each other, and honestly, just talk. We had been told about 12 times, nicely by the manager, that we shouldn't be going in there for several reasons, mainly because we're opposite genders though. Despite her polite warnings, we continued to violate the rule. The 14th time she told us, we actually weren't doing anything, we were just talking. I was brushing my hair and he was on his phone. The manager told him to clean his locker out because he was banned for a month, then told me the same thing. Immediately after being told this, I went straight to the front desk to the manager and my dad to apologize and give my reason for being in the locker room. I made sure to say that the reason didn't justify my actions and that it wouldn't be happening again. They forgave me, but I still took the punishment. My ex, on the other hand, had a bit of a hissy fit about it. We're only 14. What do they think we're doing in there? It's not fair that they just get to punish us like that. Even saying, I think they're trying to set me up to expel me. I attempted to explain to him numerous times why we were banned and the rules of the locker room, as well as the student code of conduct. But despite this, he continued to go on. A few days after this, we were doing a class together, and he said he was feeling a bit upset, to which I asked why, and he said about the locker room, and that he has exams coming up that he needs to study for. I politely tried to tell him about the locker room rules again, and asked if I could do anything to cheer him up, which I kind of feel like I regret now. He said he wanted to kiss, so after the class, I went downstairs with him into the kitchen, where there are no cameras. We kept that up for about 2 more days, and then the instructor team caught on to what was happening, and they all thought he was trying to stalk me. I went home and wrote him a massive apology message, because I felt like it was all my fault, because I was the one who insisted we go into the kitchen, and he was now taking the blame for it. I also thought it was my fault that we were banned from the locker room. To be honest, I still believe it is my fault for all of this. The thought just roams freely in my mind, even after all these weeks. If I had just gotten out of the locker room with him, even just a few seconds before, none of this would have happened. Why did I think going into the kitchen was such a good idea? I still feel really guilty for everything. On that weekend, we had the Saturday classes to attend. In the first class we trained in, my ex approached the manager after being partnered in a group of 3 and told her to partner him up with a group more experienced, to which she allowed. However, he wasn't satisfied. He wanted to partner with his regular training partner, our friend. He asked the manager to put him in another group because it was ludicrously that he had been partnered with a group of people who were underexperienced when everyone knows for a fact they've been students at the school for almost as long as me. I've been in the school for coming up to 10 years now. The manager said he has to learn how to train with different people, with different fighting styles and different sizes, to which he rolled his eyes and continued to train. Later that morning, he tried putting his bags into the locker room because my dad said it was okay and he wasn't using his locker. The manager quickly explained to my dad that he had been banned from the locker room for a month and he had to take the punishment. My dad approached him and told him his bags needed to be outside the locker room, to which my ex actually scoffed at my dad and said, "Fine." After the kids' class, we were due for an instructor training session, but my ex left early and had a hissy fit, so my friend and I stayed for the session alone. The next day, my dad, my sister and I went out. Whilst we were out, I get a message from my ex asking if we were free and if his dad could call my dad about what's been going on. I told him that we were busy and that we'd be home in a couple of hours. After we got home, I didn't want to just ruin my dad's weekend, so I waited a bit to let him know that my ex's dad wanted to speak to him because I wanted him to relax for a bit. I told him maybe an hour after we got home, and he got the phone call. I didn't want to be involved in any of it, so I went to my room, put on some headphones, and just listened to music while studying. Soon before long, my dad came into my room and told me he was on the phone with them for an hour and a half. He actually got to speak to my ex about everything, and told him about the locker room situation and the kitchen situation. They said everything was going to be fine, and they would move on from it all, as it was no longer an issue. I was happy that everything seemed to be fine. My dad was somewhat in a mood that quite a bit of his day was eaten up by talking about issues that had clearly been conveyed, though. The next morning, I got a message from him saying he couldn't train with me that evening because he needed to study, to which I told him it was okay. The manager and my dad viewed this as attitude, though. Afternoon came. We had a kids' class. When he arrived, he came to the front desk to sign off his name. The manager greeted him, to which he didn't respond, just a dirty look. He put his bags in the waiting area, to which my dad offered for him to have them behind the counter with the rest of our bags, to which the manager said there was no space and he had to put them in the waiting area, to which he complied. My dad tried to tell the manager to be a bit understanding and that they should let him have his bags either behind the counter or in the locker room, to which he said again that he made the mistake, so he had to take the punishment. My dad didn't say anything else. That evening, after the class in which I trained, the manager pulled me aside and asked what had been going on with my ex. I told her that he thought the punishments we had received weren't fair and that his training had been robbed of him for months. The manager told me to tell him that he can speak to her if he has issued with the punishment we received for our actions, and she provided understanding about his training, saying that she will let the instructor team know, and they will attempt to have him partnered with more experienced people more frequently. But what had happened the other day was not acceptable, which I 100% agree with. Here's where things really begin to go downhill. It was Halloween that day. So many of our other friends, who would normally be rostered on for the kids' class and train the class afterwards, were absent. We first had a kids' class to attend, I, my ex, and our friend. During the demonstration my dad was giving, there was music blasting in the background. The music is able to be turned off by the tablet, which at the time was right there next to my ex. For about 40 seconds, my dad continued the demonstration with this music blasting over him. My friend and I noticed this. However, we had no control of the tablet, and we realized it was next to my ex about 30 seconds in, and tried to let him know subtly. He finally realized and turned down the volume. After that kids' class, my dad was fuming. He called an instructor meeting in the back room and explained to all of us that what happened in the kids' class was unacceptable. He specifically referred to my ex, as the tablet was his responsibility at the time, and he instead chose to stare at the floor. He told him that the attitude they had been receiving from him for the past week had been appalling, and it would no longer be tolerated. My dad made it clear to him that he wanted an apology for everything he had done. As mentioned earlier, due to Halloween, everyone was absent, so the class that we trained in was much smaller than usual. My ex got partnered with our friend, his usual training partner, and I was partnered with a new kid. After the class, we all went into the back room. My friend and I repeatedly told my ex, "Please, you have to apologize, you were in the wrong. Please, everything can just go back to normal." My ex didn't say anything, he just left and went to talk to my dad. Turns out he did apologize for not doing anything about the music, and he explained why it happened. My dad told me, however, his exact words about his attitude were, "The attitude I really disagree with." My dad obviously lost it, and went over the fact he had been not only giving him attitude, but the manager and other instructors' attitude, and it wasn't going to be tolerated anymore. My dad's exact words after this were, "Either man up, or the door's there." He came into the back room with his bags, and said goodbye to all of us as usual, giving us a fist bump and saying, "Saya." He never told us what had happened, or what he was planning to do next. My dad told me what had happened between them, and that he seemed to have chosen to leave, but here was still a chance he could come back. My dad also spoke some wise words to me, which is one of the reasons I'm writing this. If I liked a girl back in the day, I would have made sure that their dad loved me. Little did we know, he left and never returned. Judging by his mum's phone call on the weekend to management, he was going to be back in training the next week. Despite this, a few hours after, he emailed my dad confirming that he had decided to leave permanently. I only found this out after my cousin who trains there with his sister messaged him and asked why he wasn't at the class, saying that he isn't usually absent. He responded to saying he left, to which my cousin asked if he'd be coming back, and he said he had no plans on returning. My cousin told me about the messages, which I actually became very upset about. My cousin knew about our relationship, as well as what he had been doing. My other cousin, his sister, messaged me relentlessly, asking if I was okay, and telling me it was all going to be fine, and that he doesn't know what he's done. I called up my best friend who moved states a few years back, and the moment she answered, I started bawling my eyes out to the point I was unable to talk. My sister came in and caught on to what had happened, and explained everything to my best friend. My best friend suggested I message him to tell him about how I feel and that I didn't think we could continue things if this is how things were going to be. He messaged back saying that everything was really fresh and that we should just sleep on it and come to our senses the next day. I'm not sure why, but messaging him and then seeing his response just disgusted me. I felt sick, and I ended up throwing up in the bathroom for 10 or so minutes. My sister hung up the phone with my best friend and said we'd call her back. Turns out my sister ended up calling my ex and knocking some sense into him, telling him that he was in the wrong for showing attitude, not apologizing for it, then leaving the school. He gave some pretty crappy reasoning, not going to lie. He continued to say exams are stressing him out, which I, nor any of my friends or family believe is a valid excuse. whilst it may explain your actions, it most certainly does not excuse them, is what I told him a few days later. Despite this massive dispute, he somehow convinced me that we should just enjoy each other whilst we have each other, to which I foolishly agreed. The week after he left, I continued to bring up that we shouldn't be together multiple times, and that things won't work if he can't show respect for my dad, the manager, or any of the instructors, but he continued to insist we stay in the relationship. Anywho, exactly a week after I found out he's left for good, I got through to him, but felt horrifically guilty about it. I told him we cannot be in a relationship if he can't respect the people I love and care about, and that I hoped the relationship could work, but I couldn't see a way that it could work if he wasn't willing to fix things. He finally agreed and said that he's sorry. I told him again, he can just apologize, he can come back and we can all have a fresh start, and no grudges will be held against him. To which he just said that the message was very kind, but he isn't changing his stance on this. Now, I actually had a school event that night, and I was meant to lead my year group's dance, so I didn't really have time to be upset about that. And I had a dinner to attend afterwards with my dad, my sister, and the manager. The next day, I called up my cousin and my friend and explained everything that had happened, and I cried on the phone to them both. My cousin got his sister on the phone to come and talk to me too. Both of my cousins heard what I had to say and told me about my ex. That's pissy behavior. You deserve better. If he valued you, or any of us, our entire friend group, his training, his job, he would have stayed. I spent half of the day on the phone to them playing games online, trying to cheer up before studying, because I had an exam block coming up. I'm not sure. I'm really not. It's just that my ex seemed like he didn't want to end the relationship, and he wanted to be in it, and I feel bad for taking that away from him. I still have strong feelings towards him, but I'm not sure if he feels the same way, as I've been no contact with him for a few weeks now. I know it would be wrong for me to go scurrying back to him after what's happened. I just don't know if what I did was right. I know, we were probably too young to even be in a relationship, and I remember my dad's words from a few months back that I needed to wait until I graduated high school to start dating, and I completely ignored it. I should have just listened to my dad, because look at this situation now. I also suppose the entire thing just added on to other feelings, as my parents are getting a divorce and it's starting to get pretty ugly. That story is for another time though. I also had a few other things going on which I won't mention right now, but my ex knew about them all, and I feel like he kind of abandoned me when I needed him most. I still feel guilty that I took away something from him that he seemed to want, and he made it seem like he was happy, so AITA? OP is not an AH for breaking up with her toxic boyfriend. Her boyfriend is an AH for being disrespectful towards OP's family and rules. Instead of regretting, OP should be happy that she is no more in a toxic relationship. OP did nothing wrong by breaking up with her boyfriend, and she is not an AH, and I would rate her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for OP's boyfriend, he is big AH, and I would rate him 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from necessary_public 3933. AITA for inviting a family member to holiday plans knowing they likely can't come due to chemo and radiation treatments. I'm at a loss. I'm tired, sad, and family sucks sometimes. So today has been a rough one. Holidays are supposed to be a fun day to get together with family, and I was all over for trying to make plans for a late Thanksgiving, early Christmas in December. A family member with cancer is living with my aunt, uncle, and their children. They were recently diagnosed with cancer 2 months ago. A couple months ago, before we were aware of the cancer diagnosis, we made plans to have a big family holiday in the middle of December. All of us kids now are married and have families of our own, and this day was going to work for all of us this year. 2 weeks ago, my aunt reached out and said we're postponing family Christmas until our family members' treatments are over. So, we were planning on having it early January. Last weekend, I visited my immediate family, and my dad decided he still wanted to have something on the original date planned. Since my husband and I live 2 hours from them, and we still had that day open, we thought it would work. My dad was hospitalized a couple months ago and has been in recovery, and this would be the first year in a couple years we've had a holiday at his home, and he loves nothing more than to cook our great-grandma's holiday meal for everyone. I extended the invite to my cousin and her family, as well as reaching out to my aunt and uncle to invite them today. The whole thing backfired. My sick family member was devastated, and my aunt made me feel terrible for even trying to plan a second family holiday without them. However, they were invited knowing they may not come since our family member is in treatment and susceptible right now. I figured inviting them and including them would be better than planning something and not inviting them. I figured it would have been way worse and insensitive as hell to do it behind their back. Duh. My aunt sent some nasty text to me after I cordially invited them, told me I ruined Thanksgiving, and I felt horrible all day about it. Not to mention, I didn't see any of my family today, and I won't see them on Christmas this year. So, spending time with my family on the 15th was a huge deal. My sick family member sent a nasty text to my dad, and then my stepmom told my grandma about it, and everyone is upset, and all of us are really hurt. The family member with cancer, sick family member mentioned above, was cussing, screaming, and saying they're just going to return all of our gifts, and they want to cancel the big family holiday in January. First of all, this pissed me off hearing it from my aunt. We don't ask for gifts. Take them all back if you want to, but this kind of behavior doesn't make me want to see them at all. I know how horrible cancer is, how hard it can be. I haven't lived it, but I know it's hell. I'm sure they feel left out, scared, and unsure. But to think the whole world has to stop turning because they can't see friends and family right now is nobody's fault. It's a little selfish. Cancer is horrible. We've lost 2 very dear family members to it. I didn't see my grandma in about a year when her husband had cancer. I didn't see her at Thanksgiving or Christmas last year when her husband was in treatment, and almost didn't see them at my wedding this year. However, life doesn't stop for everyone else. We're going to keep doing things and spending time we have together. My family went through something terrible leading up to my dad's hospital stay. So this year, spending it with him and all of us getting together was priority number 1. My sick family member has been telling us for weeks that they're feeling great and things are fine, while today during this blow-up, I hear completely otherwise, and my aunt completely unloaded on me how horrible things currently are in their household. Meanwhile, we're checking in once a week to see how things are, and they're lying and saying they're fine. She made me feel awful because nobody else is helping, but they're not asking for help. AITA for trying to get my family together anyway? I feel like LOL. OP is not an AH for keeping the family connected. OP's efforts to keep the family connected are 100% justified. OP's aunt is an AH for being harsh and blaming OP. She should discuss her concerns calmly instead of overreacting. So, I would rate her 3.5 out of 5, and OP gets a 0. AITA for wanting to break up with my boyfriend because he is forcing me to film with him. My BF, 29M, and I, 27F, are both online content creators. I mostly post content on OnlyFans doing solo videos, and my boyfriend also has an OF, but he's more known for his comedy content on other platforms. We've been mutual followers for a while until he messaged me in September 2023 to see if I wanted to collab to film tapes with him. It was right after I did a tape with someone else for the very first time, which ended with a huge conflict involving money and copyrights. Everyone said I was taken advantage by them, so I wasn't sure if wanted to do it again with anybody. But to be honest, I was very interested in him. We hit it off very quickly through a couple of FaceTime calls and decided to meet a few days after his initial DM. We met up, things went well, I was infatuated with him, he asked me be his girlfriend. I said yes. He was living in Airbnb a couple states away from me at that time, and I had my own apartment. I had been living by myself for many years, so I was hesitant to the idea of living together with another person that I just met. But if I don't let him stay with me, he'd have to get Airbnb near me, which can be pretty expensive. He already blocked my number and broke up with me a couple times at this point, and I was desperate to keep him. By early mid-October, he started to live in my apartment with me. He ended up not paying rent or any of the bills throughout the 12 months of us being together. When I confronted him, he'd just yell, "You lived here anyway." He also started to post SFW content of us on his platforms around this time, which I never forced, begged, or even asked him to do so. We also did SFW live streams together on his account regularly. Live streams are another source of his income. And this was also something that he wanted to do. We were still discussing how we want to do the tape. I wasn't 100% in yet, because I got to know him a little better, and realized He doesn't have the patience to perfect the footage the way I do for my videos. I'm very particular about the way my videos look, and I can easily spend 3-4 hours just to film a 15-minute video. He's more spontaneous and just films whatever whenever. I could see him getting annoyed and arguing about this, so I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, but I let him record short clips of us having posted on his Twitter X to see people's reactions. Then I saw some negative comments about me, and that's when I knew I didn't want to do it. So, the next time he tried to record us having I told him that I don't want to do it anymore. Then he flipped out, yelled at me, and insulted me. He said that I didn't keep my promise. I never promised, and there's no contract or even text messages of me saying yes, and that he had everything planned out and posting SFW stuff of us on his page was part of the plan. But now everything is ruined because of me. This was in mid-December 2023. One of our live stream footages went viral because the way he was talking to me was manipulative and controlling, which resulted in him losing a number of followers, and his accounts got shadow banned. And somehow, that was my fault too. I really should have left him when I saw how he reacted to me saying no to filming. But I stayed for 2 reasons. 1 is because I liked him and still wanted to be with him. 2 is because I was scared of him because he's good at using words to manipulate people, and he has a large number of delusional followers that blindly worship him. I must admit that I did bad things to him too. I've hit him 3 times out of anger. I got drunk and cut myself in front of him. And things with the other guy I filmed with wasn't completely over in the first few weeks of meeting him. What I did was wrong, but he's the kind of person to twist these incidents into something much bigger for his convenience. He has made videos talking about other girls he used to date in the past, and I guess I'm scared of getting attacked or harassed by his followers. We ended up breaking up in March 2024 for 2 months and got back together in May. During the 2 months of breakup, he kept texting me, going back and forth between apologizing and begging to get back together, to insulting me for things I didn't even do. He even said, "We don't have to do anything on social media. Let's just be happy together as a normal couple," and begged me to forgive him. This didn't stop until I blocked him. I didn't block him right away because I was scared of him showing up at my place. And stupid me decided to unblock him after a while. After we got back together, things got better than the first 6 months. But after a while, I realized I didn't want to be with him anymore. I started talking to him about separating in August, but he never agreed to breaking up until recently, mid-November. Now he finally says yes to breaking up, but he's also saying that he's broke because of me, and I need to help him out by making a tape with him. He's actually broke. He doesn't even have 100 USD in his bank account most of the time, and I didn't know this until recently. Although he says that he can't force me to do anything, he's pretty much trying to manipulate me by making me feel bad for things that aren't even my fault. I don't know exactly how much he's been making, but I know it's never been stable even before we met. I really don't want to do any more tape with anybody, and I've been trying to move away from work in general. I've been trying to tell him how much I don't want to do it. In fact, I kept crying and couldn't sleep for 3 days straight because of the stress, and he saw that, but still insists that I should do it because that's what we were supposed to do anyway. I really don't want to do it, and I don't see how any of his situation is my fault at all. If anything, I was taking care of him financially, but I'm afraid he'll be upset and hold grudges against me forever if I don't do what he wants, and I have to live in fear of him doing something to me. At this point, I feel like I should do it just to shut him up so I can move on, but I'd have to stay in touch with him for a while regarding payments, and there's a chance that he'd somehow use this tape against me in the future. I feel like I'm going to end up doing it out of fear. In that case, I need to have some form of written agreement. What should I include in it to protect myself? I finally realize I'm an idiot for ignoring multiple giant red flags, and now I just want to be free. OP is not an AH for protecting herself from her blackmailing boyfriend. Kudos to OP for standing for herself. As for OP's boyfriend, he is a big AH for guilt-tripping her into filming adult content with him. His manipulative behavior cannot be justified at any rate. So, he is a big AH, and I would rate him 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. Let's now move on to the next story from New-Huckleberry 1000. AITA. For wanting to end my friendship because of how she's been treating me, I, 20F, first met my friend in college, and we almost immediately became friends. I've known her for around 3, maybe 4 years now, and don't get me wrong, our friendship hasn't always been perfect, but she's been there for me, and I've always been there for her. A bit of backstory about how we became friends. was essentially through trauma bonding. My home life wasn't always easy, and neither was hers. And we both lived at home with our parents, who were both single parents. She lived at home with her dad, and I lived at home with my mom. We always used to joke about how we are probably long-lost sisters because of how fast we bonded and how similar our lives were. Not to mention the fact she didn't have a relationship with her mom and I never had a relationship with my dad. So it was very ironic. It's important to mention that whilst I was living at home, I never really had anyone to rely on financially. My mum and I didn't really have the best relationship, and I didn't have too many friends that I remained in contact with. It's safe to say I always kept my friendship circle small, which is how I like it. So my friend knew that I didn't have anyone to rely on who would or could give me money if I needed it. Just remember this detail for later on. We recently moved in together to a different city, as we both got into the same university to study the same course, and everything was going great. Naturally, we were both really excited to start this new chapter of our lives together. And upon the first month or so of us moving in together, we did all things you can imagine two friends living together would do. We would sing and dance until late, cook meals and eat together at the dinner table, go out and spend time with each other, watch movies together, and even make videos and TikToks, ones that we never posted, but it was a nice thing to look back on with each other and laugh about. It was all really fun. But after that, things started going downhill. It started with her making rude remarks toward me. It's not something that she's never done before, like I said earlier. Our friendship wasn't always perfect, and that's one of the reasons why. She has always found a way to judge me or give me backhanded compliments, which, as a fault of my own, I never really pulled her up on. I would just let it slide, and we would move on as normal. But now that we are living together, it's not something I want to deal with all the time. If I'm being honest, I think the trigger of all this was how she treated my boyfriend when he came to visit. My boyfriend and I have an age gap of 13 years, and he isn't the same ethnicity as myself. Again, important to remember for later on. But he's been there for me and showed me what real love is supposed to be like. Before I moved away, we had been planning and arranging dates for him to see me, as we knew that we would be doing this whole long-distance relationship thing, and it wouldn't be easy. I told my friend in advance about him and that he will be coming to stay for the night. As I was telling her about him and about how happy he makes me, she stayed silent, only asking a few questions here and there. As I mentioned before, my boyfriend and I aren't super close in age, and honestly, I was hesitant to tell her, so I will admit, I held off telling her his age for as long as possible. I'm still not 100% sure why I did that. Maybe it's because deep down, I knew what her reaction would be, but at the same time, I also hoped and expected she would be happy for me. Happy that I'm happy. The day he came, I met him at the train station and I had so much anxiety about him and her meeting. They are both really important people in my life, and I really wanted more than anything for the two most important people in my life to not only meet but get along. I think sometimes my friend forgets how long I've known her for and how obvious her facial expressions are, so I've learned to read her body language. Her face when she saw my boyfriend told me everything I needed to know, and let's just say it was riddled with judgment. She didn't make an effort to talk to him, but of course my boyfriend made the effort to get to know her, especially as he knew how important this was to me. Later that day, my friend invited her boyfriend to our apartment since we planned to all go out that night, and after he came, I barely saw her. She would avoid being in the same room as me and him for too long, and didn't really say much. Long story short, once we all went out to this event, my boyfriend and I lost where my friend and her boyfriend were, so we went home, assuming they would be there. They were not. The next day, I drop him off, say my goodbyes and cried like a baby in the Uber, ride home whilst on the phone to him LOL. As soon as I got home, I went to my room, cried some more, and ended the conversation. They must have been waiting for me to end the call, because as soon as I did, my friend and her boyfriend came into my room and both laughed, making fun of my boyfriend, the fact that he is white and anything else you can think of, which naturally just pissed me off so much, because I couldn't believe they judged him without even trying to get to know him. That, and the fact that I am half white, and was raised by mum who is white, so it just drove me insane that they made race a factor. At that point, as you can imagine, I was shocked and still vulnerable from being a crybaby, so I tried to be level-headed, and not exacerbate the situation because I did not have the energy for that. They were both rude from the beginning, So the fact they were smiling in his face but laughing behind his back made me kind of protective of him, because if they didn't give him the chance to fight back and defend himself, I would do it for him. The upcoming weeks after he left, I addressed her behavior and how rude it came across, and she apologized and told me that he just wasn't what she expected. After a few days, she got me a card and flowers as an apology, which I accepted, and we hugged it out and moved on. I thought that was the last of that. But after a few weeks, my friend and her boyfriend were talking on the phone, which isn't unusual. But she would whisper and attempt to talk about my relationship and plan to set me up with other men so I could get rid of him. I didn't say anything. She didn't even know that I heard. I just left the room and went to bed. Since then, I haven't wanted to open up to her or talk to her about any of my emotions because I feel she would judge me. I started closing myself off from her and isolating myself in my room. She started to notice my behavior and has pulled me up on it. For some reason, I just couldn't stand to be around her, and she really started to trigger my anxiety. I have a history of anxiety and depression, which I opened up to her about, and she did tell me she will give me my space until I wanted to talk and hang out with her again, which I thought was really nice. And this is where I think that I'm the one being the in this scenario. She was making the effort to try and spend time with me, and I just couldn't keep doing it with her, because every time we hung out, she would say something to insult me. She has also said she is offended. I don't spend time with her, which is ironic because she's always in her room, or out with her boyfriend, and in the past when I have hung out with the two of them, they would leave after a few hours to go somewhere else, so I gathered what's the point. It's because of this I started to just go on walks on my own. I think the last thing she did that really upset me was her trying to publicly embarrass me in uni. As I said, we attend the same university, on the same course, but we have different classes. For one of our classes, we're on the same floor and have the same breaks. For my class, we were told to go out and practice filming in different formats in groups. We study film BTW. As I've mentioned before, I have a history of anxiety and depression, and I still get the odd few anxiety attacks. Not as crazy as they used to be, thank God. But obviously, it's never a nice feeling. I wasn't 100% myself, but I still spoke to her and joked with her as normal. As she was around my group, she saw that I made a mistake. No big deal, so I brushed it off. Until she wanted to announce, "Oh, she's a bit slow, ignore her. She does it all the time." Now, at that point, I just snapped and asked her, did she really just say that about me and how rude that was? She didn't say anything, and I ignored her for the rest of the week. Cut to our most recent issue that is tipping me over the edge mentally. Her boyfriend, who also moved to the same city as us for university, not the same university though, has been coming over a lot lately. As in, he's basically moved in here. He doesn't live far from us either. And this typically wouldn't be a big issue, but since he's always here, staying every night and every day, other than Monday nights, as that's when we're at university, I'm left to clean up after both of them. I've always been the one to clean the entire apartment, other than her room, and my friend never has. I clean up after myself as one should because this is a communal space. We both live here, and it's important to be respectful, and also to not live like animals. I did tell her before we moved in that I didn't mind cleaning and taking the trash out, but now it's getting ridiculous. One thing about me is I cannot stand mess at all. If anything is untidy, I clean it. I can't look at it for too long. It's probably the way I was raised. My mum is the exact same. She worked as a cleaner before she became a nurse, so maybe that has something to do with it. And the fact that she wanted to influence me to keep a clean space, which I'm glad she did. Anyway, I wouldn't mind if they at least made the effort to clean up a little after themselves, but it's like they purposefully leave dishes out, they don't wipe after they cook, or if any food has fallen or anything, they don't vacuum. They do nothing. All they do is wake me up at night slamming doors around, or yelling and joking around at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and just ridiculous times in the morning. I honestly feel like I'm a maid. It's like I don't live here or pay the bills or my half of the rent. It's like I'm slaving away after them in an apartment that I'm supposed to call home. And I feel like I shouldn't have to tell her to clean up after herself. She's 20. That should just be a thing that people do. Another thing to mention is that when her and I first moved in here, we worked at the same job in a warehouse for no longer than a month. It wasn't much money, but it was something. And since we were now responsible for paying rent and bills, etc., we weren't in a position to be picky about what job we did. In all fairness, I could happily work any job. Before I moved in with her, I worked full-time at a warehouse and made my own money, to the point that I could have probably just moved out on my own. Anyways, long story short, they fired us from that job because we were always late to work. She never left early for work and I tried to get her to, but she just wouldn't. I am very overly cautious as well though. I always plan to get to my destination half an hour or so before I need to be there to keep traffic in mind, etc. I can't fully blame her for us losing our job. She never forced me to leave with her, but she did know that I would always be dressed hours before we were supposed to leave, and that I was always the one to wait for her. Now that we don't have a job, things are getting hard. I've been applying to jobs every day, and it seems no one wants to hire me despite having a fair amount of work experience. I've had to borrow money from my boyfriend for bills and food, which I really appreciate from him, but I hate that I have to take money from him. My friend, on the other hand, seems to have money and people to borrow money from. The worst part is, rent is due in a few weeks, and she is asking if I have anyone to borrow €575 from so I can pay off my rent, as if people just have that kind of money laying around in this economy. She left me to pay the first 3 months of bills in full on my own until just recently, which, as you can imagine, used up more money than I should have. Her and her boyfriend go on daily shops and keep that food for themselves, cook it, and leave the mess for me to clean up. I've applied to funds and student overdrafts as a last resort, so I can actually keep affording to live here. But she doesn't seem to care. I've asked other people what they make of the situation, and I've been told to move out ASAP and that she's a bad friend. I'm thinking about terminating my lease early as she's the main tenant, and apparently only I can do that, but she can't. The only issue is money is super low right now, and I would have to pay €300 VAT for my landlord to find a replacement tenant for me, along with me having to continue to pay rent and bills until they find a replacement. And I don't have that kind of money or time, unfortunately. I'm thinking about leaving here ASAP and moving back home and travel back and forth for 2 out of the 7 days just for university and either go back to my old job or find a new one until I make enough money to save up and move out independently. With all that being said, I don't want to leave her in the deep end or screw her over in any way, but the way I'm feeling right now, I think I might. I'm no longer cleaning up after them. Whatever mess they make they can clean, and the trash they have left tied up for me to take is being left there because I refuse to keep doing this for them, especially since she's left me in such a situation financially. OP is not an AH for thinking of protecting her well-being and mental peace. This must be the foremost priority no matter what happens. Not OP. Rather, OP's roommate is AH's for overstepping OP's boundaries. OP should just let her roommate out of the apartment ASAP. As for scores, I would rate OP's roommate 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH score. Let's now jump onto the next story from wave_reef. AITA for not putting my friend first? Basically, I, 22F, met this girl, 24F, in work back in March 2024. We became close friends. There were a group of 6 girls in this friendship group. 4 of us worked together. Due to various incidents throughout the year, it ended up just me and Julie. Note, I am still friendly with the other 4 and speak to 3 regularly. Julie does not. I am in university away from home, and Julie keeps making your mum jokes and describing my mother in a nature. I pleaded with her to stop for months, and she finally did when I threatened violence. I'm not proud of it, and would never follow through. We had signed for a flat together, and as Julie was set to move in before me, she told me all the things she would do, the traps she would set in my room. I had a breakdown of tears over it, and another friend, Steve, came with me one night to make sure she hadn't done anything. Julie had a major surgery in August, and I said when it was upcoming that I could take care of her. Unfortunately, when the date was revealed, months in advance, I was already planned to go back home to care for my mother, whilst my sister was on holiday. Julie said, "So you care about your mother more than me?" I simply said yes. I mean, it's my mother. Once I was back, I popped down as often as I could, as I had university deadlines. I got a boyfriend in the summer, and like all new couples, we like to spend time together. I was at his for a weekend just after I moved in, and when I came back to get ready for work, Julie was drinking in her room. I heard a very large bang, so went to see what was going on. On my way, the door goes. It's the downstairs neighbor, complaining that over the last few days the noise has been too much. I apologize, as I wasn't there, and go and see Julie, who is drunk as a skunk, shouting about how no one cares. Oh, and that bang was her hitting her head repeatedly on the desk. We get into a shouting match, but I have to leave for work. We eventually sit down, and there are plans in place to help with her mental health. 2 weeks ago, she asked if I was free for a life update. I am busy with work, university, and placement. I get in from work and she is instantly on at me. I ask if I can just have my dinner and we sit down. She pulls out a list on her phone and which is everything I'm doing wrong. My boyfriend is always over. I had an emergency and had to leave him in the flat alone for an hour. This is not okay. I never have time for her. I literally come home to sleep, then I'm out again for university. I was unavailable to go away for her birthday, came around all my deadlines, but I'm free to go home with my boyfriend at the end of the month, booked in advance. I had her keys, so after a hard day at work when all I want to do is go to bed, to have your boyfriend answer door is unacceptable. I had bad stomach cramps and didn't want to walk down 3 flights of stairs, so when he offered to go, I didn't say no. She can hear us talking at night in bed, same hun. I go out with friends. They don't want her to come as she's so unpredictable with alcohol and just ruined the night many times. After she was done, I said okay, anything else? Told her why all our other friends want nothing to do with her and that I don't want to live with her next year as I like being her friend and we can't be friends and live together. This was exactly 2 weeks ago and she has not said a word to me since. I've seen her in the kitchen and said hello. She just stares and get a drink and leaves. She came out to do the bins I was already doing. I said, do not worry, I'll do it. She throws the bag down and slams her door. This is the weird bit. On Wednesday, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom. She walks in and just stands in the doorway staring at me. For 2 minutes, just staring. I don't say anything, as of course I'm brushing my teeth, but it really gave me weird vibes. Anyway, I have noticed in the last 2 weeks a constant feeling of sickness, bad stomach aches, really bad acne flare up, and I'm even losing a bit of my hair. So, my question is AITA for not just putting her first? OP is not an AH for prioritizing her family over a friend. OP's friend Julie is an AH for being manipulative and an attention seeker. She exhibited AH behavior by making inappropriate jokes about OP's mother. So, I would rate OP's friend 3.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from LL_Epiphany. AITA for telling my friend I like someone she already told me she likes. I 16F have met my BFF. Let's call her Sarah 16F last year. She was a new student and we instantly clicked. She was the one friend that I needed in my life. She's so sweet, so beautiful, so caring in the most mind-blowing ways. I love her to death, especially that I have a series of friends betrayals. Like more than 5 friends that I used to call my ride, or die in the span of time of 2 years. So, like I said, we met last year and we became friends. Me, her, and this 2 others dude that were in our class, let's call one of them Jake. So last year, I always felt there was something between me and Jake, the same way I felt like there was something between Sarah and the other dude. And it wasn't just me, like Sarah herself would tell me that me and Jake would be cute together and stuff, and how he def had a thing for me. TBH, I felt it too from the way he talked to me plus other incidents and hints, but I just didn't want to risk our friendship for some feelings that I still didn't feel sure about since my ex was also in my mind. And yeah, eventually I spent the next couple of months liking my ex again and trying to deal with it that I completely forgot about everything else. Now, after a year, I started to feel like I'm getting those feelings back. Still not sure 100% sure often, but like, yeah, def something here and there, but I still didn't tell Sarah, because I was low-key embarrassed about it. Anyway, like about 3 weeks ago, Sarah told me she felt she's starting to developing something for Jake, and I was genuinely happy for her since they're both my friends and really did support her. But after like 2 to 3 days, she went back on her words telling me she doesn't actually like him, and the only reason she started to feel something for him was because of her recent breakup. And it's not the first time this happens to her, because she had been on and off with her ex, and afterwards, she mentioned feeling something for a random guy, but really soon be like, actually no, it's nothing, I don't even like him. So that was that. But like after a couple of days from this, we were talking again about guys, and I just casually mentioned like Jake, but not really seriously though. I didn't tell her when which was on me. She started teasing me about him and saying things like, oh, my friends are going to date each other. I told her that was absolutely never going to happen, and we just finished laughing and went on with our days like usual. I really didn't think about it because she is my best friend, and I just can't keep anything from her, and she told me she didn't like him, and it only lasted a moment. I thought it would be fine if I told her, we're just not used to keeping things from each other, and I really didn't mean anything. Well, yesterday she told me that she couldn't hold it any longer, and told me that she was actually really made and upset after my confession. She was so hurt from it, and even went and vent to all our mutual friends, which are mostly her friends, but I was trying to be friends with them, and we were getting closer. She told me about how they were bad-mouthing me, and thought I was a which at the time didn't really actually interest me at the time. because the only thing I cared about is how much I hurt my BFF and the fact that she was considering blocking me. I latterly felt like I was about to cry and just wanted to keep my one and only true friend. Edit. So this was what I posted yesterday in r/Tifu. And since it got deleted, I decided to repost it here today after I went and apologized over again to my friend and explained since when this happened and why I even told her. And that's when she told me about this last part, the bad mouthing and the other friends, and the fact that they were smiling to my face while talking behind my back. Plus the fact that she only told me because when she was talking to the friends, Jake heard her and found out about my feelings. Apparently, he was really interested in what he heard. He kept asking her about it for days, and if it was true, and if when he used to joke about liking me, did I tell Sarah how that made me feel like? After days of this, she just ended up telling him my feelings for him weren't true and aren't really serious. And I mean, I wasn't really planning on ever being with him because I wanted to focus on my studies. And she came to tell me this since he found out because of her about my feelings. After today, I still feel like but I can't help but sense some betrayal because after I hurt her, she didn't confront or talk to me, but went behind my back to talk to other people that I know, how they all had been hating on me in secret and acting all nicely in front of me, how she never thought of telling me all this until yesterday. So Reddit, please confirm to me, are my feelings valid? Like, am I allowed to feel this way even after screwing up? And what should I do and how could make it up to Sarah? Even though she told me all of this with a smiley face and told me she only came to tell me after all the anger and sadness left her, and that she really did forgive me, but I can't help but feel like and confirm to me AITA, because I feel like my mind had been trying to play tricks on me, trying to convince me I'm not the I really have no one to talk about this to, so please, anything could help. OP is not an rather her friend Sarah is an for backbiting OP and not addressing the issues between them directly. Given the situation, OP's reaction is 100% justified. As for scores, I would rate OP's friend 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the scale. AITA for overreacting when I yelled at my mom to stop laughing at me when I was trying to practice my instrument. I live by myself with no partner or roommate. My mom and brother are staying over at my house for a week because it was my mother's birthday and she wanted to. Anyway, I wanted to start a new hobby because every day I come home from work, bored with nothing to do, then scroll on my phone on various social media apps. I already play piano, so I was thinking I should try playing another instrument. I chose to play a brass instrument, and one of my dad's friends actually had a BB trumpet, so he gave it to me. I don't have any experience on playing it at all, but decided why not to just try it. I got the trumpet a few weeks ago, and I am just watching tutorials on YouTube. What I am trying to play is Hot Cross Buns. Yes, it is one of the easiest songs ever to play, but I have trouble making a buzz with my lips. I have watched many videos, and I am still very confused. By the way, if anyone can explain how to, that would be great. I practice every single day, 10 minutes of trumpet and around 30 minutes of piano. So today was the day before my mom's birthday, and she came over in the morning with my brother. My dad is actually a music teacher, and when I was little, he taught me piano. But then I started college and had no time to focus on piano. But after I graduated, I started to practice again. Anyway, around like 6 or 7 p.m., I opened my trumpet case and took it out. The moment I started playing it, I heard laughter. It was my mom. I tried to ignore it because we always joked about how bad I sound, but I actually was trying this time, so it really bothered me. A couple minutes later, my mom burst into my room with my grandma on call. I looked at my mom trying to not freak out right there and there, because who knows, maybe she came into my room to ask me to talk with my grandma, which I have no problem to. But what everyone guessed, she started laughing and giggling crazily. My grandma wasn't really laughing at all. She just listened to my mom laugh. I then asked her, "What's so funny?" And then she started to point at my instrument and proceed to say how bad I sounded like. After she insulted me, I tried telling her politely that I'm actually trying and please stop making fun of me. She just looked at me with a grin of unseriousness, which made me very annoyed. She then started talking to my grandma of how badly I sounded like and started telling me how it sounded like a fart from my brother. I then couldn't hold back and started telling her how I didn't like what she was saying and how I found it really rude of how she humiliated me on call with my grandma. She was a little stunned because she thought I was going to laugh with her. She then realized what I was saying and said I always laugh at what she does, which I don't. I tell her if she is doing something wrong or rude, but I don't necessarily laugh and embarrass her over and over. We kind of went back and forth until I put away my trumpet and said I wasn't going to play anymore today. She does encourage me to play, but she then just left my room with the same annoying grin as a popular high school girl who just told someone's crush they liked them. I then just laid in my bed, doom-scrolled on some characters edits on TikTok, and tried to forget about the situation. A little bit after that, I went to go practice piano since I felt like it. After maybe 5 minutes of me practicing, my mom again came and tried to talk to me. She tried to say, I was just laughing at how the instrument sounds blah blah blah. Piano sounds nothing like a trumpet, so I was just laughing at that blah blah blah. I then just gave her a look like, really? And then she proceeded to say, oh my gosh, you're overreacting. I was just teasing. You need to get a hold of yourself and realize that nobody will like you if you can't take a little bit of laughing. I gave up at that point. I looked down, sighed, closed my piano book, and walked to my room while my mom kept yelling my name to respond to what she said. But I had enough. If she was going to just disrespect me and my wishes, then what would be the point? Luckily, she left me alone so I could calm down and not immediately start yelling at her. 30 minutes after, my brother came to my house since he works pretty late. I was already in my bed, pretending to sleep, because I could not just go talk normally with my mom after what she said. Also, my brother plays piano and trombone, so he knows a little bit about music knowledge. I couldn't really hear what my mom and brother were talking about, but I wasn't asleep and was just on my phone still. After a while, I heard my brother yell out my name calmly, and I just went into the living room where I found my mom and brother. My brother just asked about my day, and he is just a very talkative person, so he always likes to ask icebreakers or questions like these. After I chatted with him, not looking at my mom one bit, my mom started to talk about how she called my dad, and he said something about playing sloppy was normal, and not sounding good is fine. I couldn't take it anymore. I just told my mom, hell no, I'm not doing this again, and went to my room. I was even more mad than before, so I really wanted to punch or let my frustration out somehow, but I couldn't at 11 p.m. The next day, she went to go visit some of her friends since I lived near them. My brother went to work again, and I'm now all alone in my house, so please, someone tell me if I am overreacting or what. I am not a very sensitive person, but I am very self-aware and absolutely hate when anyone bring down me or anyone. I don't have a close bond with any of my family nor any of my friends. I don't want to go into too much depth in why, but a little bit, is that my parents, brother, and cousin joked about me having depression and insomnia, which I had, and I was in a state where I felt lonely as hell with no one to talk to. They honestly joked about a lot of my mental problems. Some examples are joking about how I have no friends and being lonely, saying I'm dating my guy friends after I kept saying that I'm not, and was really frustrated with everyone telling me that, saying I dressed up horribly after I was trying to express myself, always telling me my brother will be better than me in everything I do and that I suck, and a bunch more things. I'm doing all right now. I don't have many friends. I am mostly alone, just going to my job, making money, and watching social media. So, yeah, I'd love to hear what other people think. OP is not an AH, nor did she overreact. Rather, OP's mom is an AH for making fun of OP and belittling her feeling serious conditions like depression and loneliness. OP's mom is really a cruel lady who doesn't even feel empathy for her own daughter. As for OP, her reaction is 100% justified, and she is not an AH, and I would rate her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for OP's mom, I would rate her 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Throwaway09. I see AITA for making my husband's groomswoman wear a wig or be disinvited from our wedding. To give a little background, I met him at a farmer's market when I was 18, and he was 26. We are now 24F and 32M. We've been together for a little bit over 5 years, and I'm very happy with him. Now, to the story. My fiance's friend, Brittany, has been friends with him since they were in elementary school. Throughout our early dating days, I expressed I was not a fan of this woman. There are many reasons as to why, such as us not having common interests and absolutely polar opposite moral codes. But the main one was her interest in embarrassing me and my fiancé, possibly because she likes him. When we were first starting to go on dates, she had shown up and tried to invite herself to the date because he had told their mutual friend group chat where he was taking me. She then decided that she would go to the same restaurant and had tried to make a scene about him cheating on her and that she was heartbroken. It escalated very quickly, and it ended with me asking the manager to get her trespassed, as she was delusional and I, nor my date, did not want her around. This sort of situation happened 3 more times, even going as far as showing up to his grandparents' house to stop me from meeting his family. At that point, I made it clear to him that if anything like that were to happen again, I'd be out of there, which he completely understood and agreed with me, wholeheartedly. He convinced his friend group to go low communication about Brittany with him because she was acting weird around him, and they all understood and disagreed with her actions. He had extremely low contact after that point, and I learned years later that she had gotten major therapy, even checked herself into a mental hospital, and went on medication to stop these absolutely unhinged personality traits. Around 4 years later, they reconnected through a mutual friend's birthday party we were all at, and she genuinely seemed like she had changed personality-wise from the person I had met 5-ish years ago. We still didn't agree on most things, but she apologized for the way she had acted previously and owned up to all the BS she tried to pull with him. So, I just kept my guard up, but encouraged my fiancé to make friends with her again. I'm not friends with her, but I am friendly towards her. Skipping to now, I have been planning this wedding basically since I was born, over-exaggerating, but it has been in my thoughts since I was a young child. The wedding will not happen for another 2 years. The theme is supposed to be similar to D&D style fantasy. A Renaissance wedding with blue, orange, and red as the basic color scheme. Most of the wedding would be held outside at a local state park, but part of it would be held inside. Specifically, the cake and food would be cut and served inside, as well as some of the guest photos. This is the important part. I have a personal friend, Bree, 28F, who does professional pictures at Renaissance festivals across the US. Her job is to drive around across the country to Ren fairs and take pictures for certain venues. It's a very cool job and I love seeing the pictures. However, she does edit for some of these venues with a green screen to make it look more aesthetic, or to totally change the scenery behind the people in the photo. For example, she showed me mock-ups for me in the past, showing silly people in costumes being chased by goblins and trolls, a dragon breathing fire behind a party of knights, and even a garden of lights with fairies flying through it, etc. It's silly stuff and is for people to have fun with. My idea was to incorporate this into my wedding. The guests would choose whatever background they'd like from a catalog that my friend and I put together, and Bree or her teammate would take pictures of them throughout the day. These pictures would be uploaded electronically and then be edited by her after the wedding. These were mandatory for all guests that wanted to participate, so I could use the pictures for postcards and scrapbooking. It's my hobby. The people who wanted to take part in this activity would have to check a box on the save the date form I sent out. My assumption is that most guests would be doing this, as most of the people that will be invited are extremely rambunctious and love activities involving being silly. I do want to make it clear, these would not be the only pictures taken at the wedding. There still would be normal pictures being taken of the wedding itself, as well as photos that will likely be framed and used as decorations that would have no green screen of my husband and I, and the wedding party. A few days after he had proposed, my fiancé asked me if I'd feel comfortable with him inviting Brittany to the wedding as a groomswoman. Honestly, I was fine with it, until the topic of her hair came up. In the year or so that he had reconnected, she cut and dyed her hair a lime green with a cool undertone and highlights. I honestly really like it, and it suits her facial structure extremely well. However, I was worried about the green screen and her hair, so I invited her to my friend's home a while later so we could see if the screen would blend with her hair. Unfortunately, it did. In the pictures, you could see a major glitch with every background we tried because of her hair. I asked my friend if there was a way to edit around it, and she said there was, but it would be an extra amount of money because it would be way more time to go through and possibly edit multiple photos of her with groups of people and herself, so the picture wouldn't glitch. I'm very against this, as our budget has to be semi-perfect. We are accounting for accidents and issues, but not extra money to my friend's business because of one woman's choice of dye blending very well with the green screen. While I do love her hair, I asked if she'd wear a wig to the wedding so she could still be included in the green screen pictures. Even offered to get it professionally done, and I'd pay for that. This is when she became very angry with me. To sum up what she had said, her being asked to wear a wig was basically me saying I wanted to cover herself, that her hair was an expression of herself and that she loved it. I told her that I loved it as well, but in order for her to be included, she would need to wear a wig, as the green in her hair cannot just be covered up via a hat or other headwear. She has been saying that I just don't want to include her in the wedding. As a compromise against the wig, I proposed that she gets more pictures of her having fun taken at the wedding itself instead of the green screen. She didn't like this idea because she claims it isn't fair. All the other guests get to be put in a fun picture, and she's the only one not allowed. Though I sort of agree with her, it isn't to the fault of my own. So, I offered that she paid for the extra editing costs. It would be to take and edit more of her pictures. At first, she was fine with the idea, until I mentioned that the extra editing would cost around $100 for just a singular picture to be taken and edited by my friend. And the final price depended on how many photos she ended up in on the green screen. Then, she declined the offer and tried to throw it in my face that Bree's prices were outrageous. I disagreed with her sentiment about the prices, and I haven't spoken to her since then. Throughout this whole ordeal, my fiancé has been on my side, but he has been upset over her possibly not being there. While he does agree with me about not wanting to pay more for just her, as well as that she's being overdramatic, he has sympathy for her being the only person being left out of this choice activity. While I also have sympathy, I just don't see an alternative here. We can't use a blue screen over a green screen because the colors of the wedding are blue, red, and orange. And I don't wish to pay for a new screen for my friend's business just because of one person, and the alternatives I have come up with, she has shot down. So, my final decision was to ask him to disinvite her from the wedding to not create further drama if she does not want to wear a wig. After long talks between us, he agreed with me and sent her a message that she would be disinvited entirely and would be welcome to celebrate with just us after our honeymoon had ended. They met up soon afterwards and he stayed firm on the matter. Despite her crying and still refusing to do anything to correct her hair, she still believes that me asking her to do this is because of some power imbalance and that I just want to bully her, which I don't think I'm doing. She has a year to think it over. I can tell this situation bothers him though, and I've addressed it a few times. All of the times I have, he says it is for the best, as she would just ruin the photos she was in with the green screen and could cost us to delete hundreds of pictures purely based on her actions. I agree, but it still bothers me that I'm doing something wrong, especially since after this incident, her mom and dad have reached out to me to scold me for abusing my power against their daughter on one of the biggest parties she's ever been invited to. Even my friends are split on the issue, all of them having sympathy for her, but some of them saying I'm an AH because I won't just let her come to the wedding and have someone to block her from taking any pictures with the green screen. And just to make sure the record is straight, I am not trying to force her to change her hair in any way. I do not want her to dye it differently, nor would I expect her to. I purely just want a non-green wig to be put on her head for the wedding, and then she can remove it afterwards. I would normally say that she could remove it after the green screen portion, but I'm still working out if I'm just going to let it stay up for the entire day of the wedding, or if I'm going to hold other activities for everyone, and have Bree close the photo stuff down. Again, wedding isn't for another 2 years, so I'm able to think it over for at least a year. AITA, TL, DR. My husband's groomswoman won't wear a wig for my wedding, due to her believing it is her sense of pride. While I do like her hair, she could potentially ruin pictures of a green screen photo op activity I will be having at my wedding, costing us more than $1,000 for pictures I cannot use, and even more money if I got her photoshopped out or blended in with the background. All other alternatives given to her have been denied. This has caused my husband to give her an ultimatum, where he outlines that she will be uninvited if she does not agree to the terms within a year. Am I the AH for this? Update. I honestly didn't think I'd post an update at all this year because I mostly got the confirmation. I needed to know I was mostly correct in my assumption that she'd cause more drama at the wedding than necessary, and that I'd be correct in that I would be okay to disinvite her. I was trying to be detailed in that post, but in this one I'm going to be a little less detailed. Basically 3 days ago, I was sent my post on Messenger from Brittany. She is a notorious Reddit lurker apparently, and saw it a few hours after it was posted. It didn't even have to get multiple upvotes because she just reads the ones available on the recent category. I told her I posted because I had a lot of inner conflict towards my involvement with my fiancé choosing to disinvite her if she can't just make some form of sacrifice to not be in the green screen, wear a wig, so she can be included. She got extremely mad at me, called me names, threatened that I'd be sued for defamation, etc. This honestly just made me realize how little she actually changed. Of course I showed my fiancé, and he was appalled at her actions. He said he was going to block her, and did so that day. And so did I. Yesterday, I woke up to 43 missed calls from a number I did not recognize. That ended up to be her, and a dozen voicemails claiming that I was stealing my fiancé away from her again, that I had purposefully targeted her for just wanting to be included with everyone else, and so on. I do not know how she got my number, but I obviously blocked it. After that, I reported her to the police on the non-emergency line because I didn't know if I would be needing to fear for my safety. I'm really glad I did this. After my fiancé had left for work, she showed up to our home and knocked on the door. I cracked a window near the door and asked what she wanted. She said, whilst crying, that I needed to let her in the house because it was her right to be with my fiancé, not me. She started kicking at the door, and I told her to knock it off. Immediately, I just started dialing the non-emergency police number for my nearest precinct because I already knew what was happening in that moment, and I was supposed to be clocking in for work on my computer at that moment. I texted my boss, and she excused my absence for the day as well. As I was doing this, I kept repeating, "Go away. I called the police, and I do not want you here. You are trespassing." She was saying all kinds of things I don't wish to repeat here. But the lesser of the things she was saying involved calling me a white racist pig. She is mixed race and so am I. Saying she was 8 months pregnant with my fiancé's baby. There's quite literally zero proof of this, including no baby bump, despite being a fairly thin woman. Screaming that she would take me to hell. Trying to break my metal outside door, but instead hurting herself instead. And so on. Basically, she had a full-on meltdown. The police came, saw that was trying to break my door down, and immediately put her in cuffs and sat her down. She was claiming this was her house and that she'd lived there for 10 years, that I had broken in and locked her out, etc. Of course, because of her psychotic appearance, I was questioned and once given the real story. As well as being able to provide proof that I was the owner of the home, she was taken to the police station. As far as I'm aware, she was booked for the night and was let go today. I did agree to a temporary no-contact order, and my fiancé and I are going to proceed with a permanent one. Her parents called after they heard she was put in a holding cell and apologized profusely. Apparently, Brittany had lied to them about the extent of her actions and downplayed a lot of it. On the exterior, she seemed fine and well-rounded, but mentally, she had snapped again from not taking her meds for a year. She never told her parents this, just acted normally until one of her triggers came back, my fiancé. No, he didn't do anything wrong. She just had a major trigger when it came to him because of a deeply obsessive personality disorder. I wasn't trying to air her dirty laundry about her medical history the last post, but she was diagnosed with BPD and a large handful of disorders caused by trauma she had endured in her childhood from her great-grandfather. She's an unhealthy person, and I regret even allowing her to have the notion that we had forgiven her for her past. I'm pretty shaken from this ordeal, and I can't believe this was all because of a goddamn green screen and some pictures that were supposed to just be treated as silly holiday cards for my foreseeable future. This is making me rethink the idea altogether, to be completely honest. Maybe I'll just rent an adult bouncy house because that seems more fun than green screen professional photography. Anyways, that's the update. Thanks for reading and the advice I was given in the last post. OP is not an AH because she tried to offer reasonable solutions to include Brittany in the wedding despite her toxic behavior in the past, but it was Brittany who didn't accept any of offers OP gave to her, so here OP did nothing wrong here. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 and Brittany 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story, Lost_Boysenberry_506. AITA for telling my sister-in-law no to seeing her for Christmas? I, 24F, and my sister-in-law, 34F, let's call her Stacy, don't get along to say the least. We haven't actually gotten in any fights and I don't typically stand up for myself. For a little bit of context, she married my brother almost 10 years ago, when I was 14. My parents have said that they were skeptical about her marrying my brother because of the way she behaved in front of our family members and friends. She is snippy, disrespectful, rude, and overall isn't great at maintaining meaningful relationships. She comes from a family where they struggle with social cues and come across as rude. Ever since she married into the family, it felt like she targeted me. I'm the youngest of 4 and the only girl. She and my brother lived in my parents' basement while they saved up money for medical school. She would always linger on the main floor. When I'd come home from school, I'd make myself an after-school snack, and she would immediately come into the kitchen asking, "Are you sure you should be eating that?" and rude comments like this. There are many more instances, but I want to get to the main point. My brother enlisted in the army for medical school and is gone a ton. She lived in Hawaii on base with their 2 kids, but when she discovered she was pregnant, she guilt-tripped my parents into letting her stay at their house while she had the baby. They agreed, but she never gave a firm time estimate on when she'd head back, so yes, The army was paying for their life in Hawaii, but she was getting taken care of by my parents. Long story short, she stayed with my parents for a full year, until the army had them move to Texas. She has a track record of moving in with my parents and staying with them every time she's pregnant. The problem is that she doesn't do anything to watch the kids, clean up after them, and is entitled to everything in the house, including my husband and I, who were renting their basement apartment. I lost my job that summer and was interviewing for different companies. She would allow her kids to stomp above us, knock on our windows, and scream at the top of the stairs during my interviews. I politely gave her a schedule a week ahead with future interviews, and she would magically forget about them. There are many other instances, but the biggest one is that she would call me randomly throughout the day to tell me she was sending the kids down to me because she had to run errands. She'd be gone for hours on end and come back with a couple grocery bags. She felt entitled to our time. Every weekend, she'd conveniently be busy and need babysitters, but when we'd have plans, have homework studying, or be out of town, she'd throw the biggest fit. She doesn't take the answer no very well. She only talked to us when she needed a baby sister, me to make her a cake for her birthday, or to entertain her. She views relationships with others as very transactional. Anyone who has relationships like this can understand how draining this feels. Anyways, my husband and I saved up money to move an hour away and bought our very first home. We were over the moon because we worked incredibly hard to get to this point. Last Christmas, my siblings all wanted to come up and see our house. Stacy was kind to us, but ignored her kids. She does this often. Her kids were absolute nightmares, but every time you'd go to say something to correct them, she'd shoot you a nasty look or not back you up. We felt on edge that whole night. It felt disrespectful to us and our space. After Christmas, she moved to Texas with my brother for their next assignment. She threw the biggest fit over it and called my mom daily to complain about her life, how naughty her kids were, etc. I apologize. I felt that all that backstory was necessary, but not onto the main reason for me writing this post. All the siblings do alternate Christmases, Thanksgivings. This year, we have Thanksgiving with my family, and Christmas will be spent with my husband's family. His parents are divorced, so we have even more troubles navigating the holidays as is. Stacy texted us last Friday out of the blue, asking us what our plans are for Christmas, New Year's. I told her we didn't have plans yet, but we're waiting on my husband's family to tell us their plans, and that my husband's brother and his wife are having their twins around Christmas, so we want to be there for that. She didn't take that answer and still persisted. I finally said, I'm not entirely sure on dates. I don't feel comfortable making solid plans until we hear more from my husband's family. This might seem innocent from her, but she never messages us unless she needs something from us. Get-together are never just that. It's an excuse for someone to watch her kids. She didn't like my response and ended up going to my mom about it, saying that I bullied her. Not to sound rude, but because of the alternating Christmases, she is not a huge priority to make time for her. It's my husband's family's year, and we'll be out of town visiting them. Also, because of her attitude and mistreatment towards me and my husband over the years, I feel less inclined to give her time during the happiest time of the year. I'd much rather spend it with those who treat us with kindness and respect, and with those we are closest to. Edit. Hi Stacy. I wanted to clarify something about our Christmas plans. We alternate each year, and this year it's our turn to be with husband's family. I'm sorry if I didn't give you a firm answer before, but we're just finalizing dates with them. I hope you can understand that this isn't about not wanting to be around you or the family. It's simply how we balance the holidays. I'd also appreciate if we could keep communication between us about plans going forward, rather than involving others. Thanks for understanding. AITA? OP is not an age for setting boundaries with her toxic and dramatic sister-in-law. Rather, OP's sister-in-law's is an age for being too much demanding, overreacting, and accusing OP of bullying her, especially when OP simply said no, for which she has every right. So, instead of OP's sister-in-law is an AH, and I would rate her 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. Let's now jump onto the last story for this video from ThrowRA 32737. Wibta. If I stopped being as supportive about my BF's depression, as it's making me empty myself. My BF, 28M, and I, 28F, have been dating for 3 months. When we met, he was the most energetic person ever. We would text into the night till like 4 a.m. He was constantly horny. We'd have fun nights. He seemed super into me. He was the kind of guy who would blow up my phone constantly and make me feel so good about myself. The thing is, The timing of when we got together is exactly around the time he quit his job BC. He hated it. He'd never been unemployed before, as he'd been with them for ages, and he didn't start looking for another one. He told me he has depression, and it's always been there, but that having no job is making him feel like a failure. And he's struggling to be motivated since leaving his job, as although he hated it, he had a purpose and friends. So, since we've been together, he's went from being really happy and flirty and into me to somebody who barely acts like they want me around. I wait hours for a text back. I never get time. If I do, I feel like he's faking it for me. He never asks for my body anymore or touches me. He doesn't compliment me. It's like we've been together 50 years, and the excitement is over when it's only been 3 months. He plays video games all day with his friends on calls, lasting like 6 hours, and doesn't text me. If we do text, it's really short, and me trying to talk, and him having one-word answers. This has been going on a while, and at the start I have tried to let it slide, but it was such a change that obviously it fed into my insecurities. Now that he has me, he just stopped making effort. Was it all fake? Has he got another girl and this is just lies? Does he not care anymore? So, I'm trying not to let this be about me, but I have never felt so and unloved. I look at him and think, how come you have the energy to be happy around your friends and spend hours using that energy with them, but can't with me? Which is why I'm taking it personal, I guess. I can't believe the switch that has happened. It used to be me asking him to stop asking for as I don't do that, and him begging, us talking dirty on the phone every night, and him always asking to see me, just being super eager to literally silence every day. I tried bringing this up with him, and he just made me feel so bad, as he said, he hasn't felt like himself and doesn't feel himself. Which I understand, but for months straight, you haven't been attracted to me or in the mood at all. As well, the thing is, I try and do everything I can for him. I buy him food and get it sent to his house for support. I even bought him new games. I always send texts even if I don't get them back. I put thought into things and searched the internet to work out how to play one of his games and offered to play with him saying I'd learned. And he thought it was sweet. But he doesn't do anything back for me, not even small things. I'm working full-time and a student, and he's never once offered to help me out or got me a surprise, flowers, chocolates, etc. I just want to feel good about myself too. I really feel awful making this post, because obviously it sounds like it's about me. But I promise I'm not like this with him. He doesn't know I feel this badly about it. Every time I bring it up, he just says he's not feeling himself, and it will be fine soon once he has a job. But this has been over 2 months now. And when we're together, he sleeps constantly, like for 12 hours straight, and does seem so unmotivated. He only wants to hug together in bed and not go outside or do anything. I want to be supportive and I want to be there for him, but it's making me feel so empty. I feel so unattractive and I don't know how to stop this feeling. I don't know what to do. I feel like he should be trying more to find jobs and make effort. This is where I don't know if I'm the bad person. I feel like really was happy with me, he'd put more effort to helping himself, like going to therapy or going on meds or getting a job, to at least make effort and try. Surely if you met this amazing person and thought this, you couldn't change how you felt, but you'd at least make effort? Am I being horrible here? Would I be horrible for saying this? I don't understand how if you've always been affected by this, you did have the energy to show you were into me before we dated, and now that we are, it's just as if I'm not even important. Or is this something I need to stop feeling and just keep being supportive to him? I will do this if people tell me I'm being rude. I have no idea if I need to understand his situation more and keep being nice about it, because I don't know. I want to be there for him. I just don't know what to do. OP's is not an AH for her feelings as they are completely natural and normal. Here, OP's boyfriend is an AH for not putting any effort in the relationship and being obsessed with videos games and just doing nothing. I understand he is depressed, but neglecting it is not an option. He must go for a therapy or find other ways to put an end to it. Whatever, OP's boyfriend is an AH for not making any efforts in the relationship. And I would rate him 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. My hostile dog attacked. A child who was messing up with the dog. AITA for bringing the dog out. I'm a 17 female, and I got my dog a 1.5 years ago at 8 weeks as a gift from my parents. He is a pitbull/boxer/German Shepherd mix at 80 pounds. All white with black spots and a black eye patch and bright blue eyes. Very pretty dog. He has never been a socially adept dog towards people. Very nervous. So, I started socializing him after he went to the vet a few days after I got him. And he advised me that my dog needed to be socialized ASAP, and that he will always be a nervous, socially anxious dog, but needs to be socialized to where he can be around people without becoming aggressive, otherwise it becomes dangerous. So that's exactly what I did. Almost every day I took him to the dog park to be around other dogs and people. He is perfectly fine walking, running, and playing around strangers until they approach him, to which he will bark and run away. Most people, when they first meet him, comment, "Oh, look at your eyes," and ask to pet him, so I tell them he doesn't like strangers. Everyone at the dog park knows this and respects it. A few of them have gotten to the point where they can pet him, as they've seen him often enough and he knows them. I am content with this arrangement. He is well trained otherwise and loves playing fetch. The issue arose when two seemingly unsupervised kids came into the park wanting to pet the dogs. While he is an off-leash dog, I will come into the park if there are people in the field next to the park to avoid issues, or if there are dogs in the park. This time was when there were people in the field, and so I was the only one in the park at the time playing fetch. I was sitting on the bench with him bringing me the ball to throw, and the two boys came over and asked what his name was. Kids have way too much energy, and the desperation energy around them doesn't sit right with my dog. I told them his name, and they both went to go try to pet him. His fur went up, and he let out a low growl before snatching his ball and walking away. Both boys looked disappointed, so I apologized and said, "He's not friendly to strangers." I assumed that would be the end of it, as one of the boys turned to leave. However, the other one decided to walk towards my dog calling his name. My dog let off a low, uncomfortable growl and walked away, to which the boy still followed him while calling his name and holding out his hand for my dog to come smell. I repeated again, "He isn't friendly," and I got ignored. The boy wanting to leave looked uncomfortable. I called my dog to me, as I wanted him in arm's reach, and the boy following him decided this was the perfect opportunity to come closer. Now while he is a very nervous dog and is very attached to me, meaning he is defensive, calling him over maybe wasn't the smartest choice, as instead of running away, he went into defending me against what he considered a threat. So when the boy came up, instead of running, he stood his ground and started barking. Ball still in his mouth, barking fur up and doing that jumping thing. He wasn't moving towards the boy, but I still got up and asked what he was doing, and the boy finally acknowledged me and left with his friend. I was naive to think that would be the end, as a little while later, his mother came back in and got mad at me for not allowing her son to pet my dog. I was honestly kind of shocked and didn't know how to react. I told her that he isn't friendly to strangers, and it is dangerous for everyone for him to try to pet my dog, so I didn't let him. I guess I said the wrong thing, as she accused me of letting a vicious, aggressive pit bull into a public space with little kids. I was already about to leave, as my dog was worn out enough, so I got up without saying anything and went to leave to avoid making it worse. My dog got up and trotted after me. She ran and blocked the gate, saying she was calling the cops and having my dog put down. I didn't want to try to move her, as I didn't feel like having to go through her accusing me of assaulting her, so I walked back to the bench and called my father, letting him know what was happening and asked him to come over and help me leave. For a little context, my father is very involved in the community. He works with the police department a lot and is very politically involved. So when he heard she threatened to call the cops, he let me know that he would call the sheriff directly to come over with another officer and told me to not say anything to her. So I did as direct. A few minutes later, 2 officers arrived with my father soon after. She started crying to the officers how I was harassing her and her son after her son asked to pet my dog, and she was blocking the gate still and was too hysterical to move. So, my father just climbed over the fence to go talk to me and check on my dog. I got him on a leash. I hadn't before, as I didn't want the kid running up to him when I wasn't paying attention and my dog not being able to run away, while they spoke with the mother. Then they spoke with me and my father to get my side of the story. And the whole time, my dog sat at my side, watching the officers without being aggressive. Come to find out, she hadn't called the cops like she threatened, as threatening to have my dog put down and blocking us from leaving the park can be argued as false imprisonment. And so the officers asked if I wanted to press charges. I declined, but asked if there would be a note on her record for future incidents, to which they said they would make a note of it in the system. I glanced over at her, and she had a smug grin on her face as if saying, "I won." It was very satisfying to watch it drop, as the officers walked over and had her move over, while me and my father left, and she was being told that she was lucky I wasn't pressing charges. Hearing her whine about how unfair it was, blah 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 blah, was very satisfying. While I think I handled this well, and my father is on my side, my mother thinks I went too far. That should have just had my dog jump the fence and climbed over myself and left instead of involving the cops, especially in front of the young boy. I was asked at the dog park about it the next day. As community dog park having cops show up and my dog being recognizable, I explained, and one family, who has a young girl about the same age as the boy, sided with me while others seemed uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Now I'm feeling like I might have gone too far with how I handled the situation, and I could have left a different way, but I also didn't choose to press charges, and just wanted it to be handled without me getting in trouble. But now I feel as I might have taken it too far. So, AITA for calling the sheriff after bringing my hostile dog to the dog park? I don't feel as though I am, but I'd just like the final confirmation. Edit. I would like to make an edit for clarification. This is an off-leash dog park. Dogs are specifically not allowed to be leashed at this park, as it can become a tangled mess. There is a kids' playground that is also fenced in down the street. Both are gated. He is not a friendly dog. That is not the same as being aggressive. He doesn't like strangers approaching him before he is ready. How would you like it if someone almost twice as tall as you came walking up, hands out wanting to pet you, when you can just feel their desire leeching off of them, without knowing what that desire is for? What if it was to harm you? You'd want them to leave you alone, right? He is perfectly fine with people walking past him, and will even sniff them as we walk past sometimes. He will play around them, and run past them, and brush up against them. What he doesn't like is when people reach for him or walk towards him. I am also seeing a lot of comments about me mentioning he is an off-leash dog. Yes, he is. He is trained to come back to me and walk at my hip without a leash. He is trained to play fetch and retrieve for hours on end due to his energy levels. He is not an aggressive dog. He will not go out of his way to go after people. He will run away from people if they come up to him when he doesn't like it. The field next to the park is where we normally go. It is no different than me going to the beach or the dog park. It is just a place for him to run. I chose not to go into the field as there was other people there. I know my dog would have ignored them unless they interrupted us playing fetch. But when you have an off-leash dog that is clearly trained when he brings the ball, drops it at your feet, and sits waiting for you to throw it, you will ask if you can pet it, assuming it's friendly. I went to the dog park to avoid something like this happening. OP is not an AH for taking her dog to the park. She had already alerted the boys not to play with her dog because of his nervous nature, but the boy continued. The child's mother is an AH for being aggressive towards OP and threatening to call the police. OP did nothing wrong, and her reaction is 100% justified. So, I would rate the boy's mother 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from scary_distance_5448 AITA. For not dropping everything to console my husband every time he breaks down. I, 37F, have been married to my husband, 40M, for 8 years and have been with him for 10 years. We also have a 1-year-old. And since our baby girl was born, I have gone back to work, but only work 15 to 20 hours a week, making about $1,500 a month. The past 4 years have been very trying for us due to financial issues related to a lawsuit he has been fighting, which has cost him a lot of money and stress. I tell him and not us because he is the breadwinner in our family, and although I work part-time, it's in retail. And when we first met before we got married, he bought the house we live in based on his income and not mine. The lawsuit he is fighting for is worth him fighting for, as he is a partial owner of a business, and his partner one day decided he didn't want my husband to be a part of it, and decided to just kick him out of the business and stop paying him quarterly for what the business brings in. So, I have faith that he will eventually get paid for this once the courts have settled it, but I also know that there's no telling how long it will be until something is decided, as it's already been 4 years and not settled yet. This has caused him, and I, a lot of stress, and has drained his bank account's backlog. I should add that prior to this, life was good. He never looked at prices of things, always had money. We would go on vacations, but now we never have money. He lashes out on me for not contributing enough financially, but I pay for groceries, etc. And food for our baby and 2 dogs. One of them being diabetic and needing special food and insulin every month. I also pay for our part-time nanny 1 day a week. For the past year or 2, my husband will wake up in the middle of the night and start crying. And sometimes when I'd ask what's wrong, he'd lash out at me and tell me I'm clueless and have no idea what's going on in his life, but that maybe if I paid a bill, I'd have a clue. One of our dogs, the non-diabetic dog, but bigger and can be aggressive, can sense my husband's energy/emotions and has started to bark aggressively now when she hears him start yelling or crying, which will upset my husband more, make him yell even louder at the dog, and I will not yell at the dog and rather make sure our 1-year-old is safe and try to keep her from being frightened, which ultimately ends up with my husband getting even more angry than I am, choosing to make sure the dogs and baby are taken care of, and not him. At first, I would get up and console him, but as time goes on, it has become a daily thing, and I'm becoming numb to this. I feel like I'm constantly trying to cheer him up, while also trying to not let myself go into a depression for our child, and have mastered the art of putting on a happy face and blocking out the bad stuff so I can focus on having positive energy for our child and dogs for that matter. The kind of outbursts he has, which are daily, mind you, involve him yelling at the top of his lungs, veins popping out of his head, the kind of yelling where your voice kind of has a high pitch to it, like in the movies when someone is about to explode, followed by sobbing. One minute he's screaming at me for not caring enough about him or paying a bill, and the next he's crying. So I clearly don't feel like running over to him to give him a hug after he's had his outbursts. I should also add that after our baby was born, he started accusing me of cheating on him, which I am not, saying I'm always on my phone, and it's gotten so bad that he will regularly wake me up in the middle of the night, accusing me of texting or even FaceTiming someone while in the same bed next to him. I've given him permission to look at my phone whenever he wants. I've even put my phone on opposite side of bedroom so he can't accuse me of being on it at night, but he's now saying that I must have a secret device I'm messaging people on and that he can hear me texting. He says the reason for him believing I'm cheating on him is because I clearly don't have affection towards him and our lack of life lately. I've told him that I'm constantly exhausted due to being a first-time mother, and that when accuses me of cheating on him, that too doesn't help me want to have. I love my husband and hate seeing him like this. I keep telling myself that once the financial issues subside, we'll be better, but it's changing me as a person. I'm no longer the happy person I used to be, and he's become so angry that I even hesitate to bring him around friends or family in fear that he'll have an outburst towards me in front of them or at them. I don't want to leave him, as I feel like he has no one left. He's ruined a lot of his relationships the past few years because of his anger, and people just don't feel comfortable around him. He used to be so fun to be around. Now people don't want to be around us because you never know what you'll get. He doesn't care if my mother or brother are visiting, and will even have one of his outbursts towards me, calling me everything under the sun with them in the same room. It's embarrassing, and puts my family in an uncomfortable situation as well. He claims that if I gave him the love and respect he's been asking for the past few years, that he wouldn't be this way. Is this really my fault? Am I really a bad and selfish person who doesn't care about him? I don't think this is my fault, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not seeing something. Should I be dropping everything every time he starts crying and run over him to tell him everything will be okay? Even though there's a chance he'll yell at me for not being aware of anything? I just don't know what to do anymore. OP is not an AH for prioritizing her emotional well-being. OP's husband is an AH for yelling and creating troubles for OP. He should be supportive instead of being aggressive towards OP. OP's reaction is 100% justified, so I would rate OP's husband 3.5 out of 5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from randomokgirl_24. AITA for communicating that if my brother is present, my family will not be. I, 24F, and my husband, 25M, relocated over the last year to another state. Both our families still live in our home state, and part of the reason for moving to give us some distance. Because we haven't been long distance from our families very long, we committed to being home for the holidays. We would split the trip, spend Thanksgiving and Black Friday morning with my in-laws, then drive 2 hours to my family to spend Friday evening and Saturday with them, leaving Sunday morning. Update: I really didn't expect this post to get so popular so quickly. To everyone who has urged me to see how toxic this situation is, and how important it is to separate myself and my husband, thank you. It's very humbling to have people with no skin in the game tell you to get out and stop allowing this type of behavior. This honestly isn't even the craziest situation that's happened over the years. For those emphasizing therapy to help navigate this properly, I 100% agree and have decided that's my most immediate next step. Also, to those saying I don't understand what my brother is going through or how hard his life is, everyone is entitled to their own viewpoint. But let me be clear. My brother has done everything from threaten my life to actually breaking my arm. I very ignorantly thought time in the army and away from home might be good for him and allow growth. Maybe giving us the chance to start fresh, but situations like these tell me that's not going to happen. So if I am the AH for cutting that type of abuse off, I'm okay with that. It's important to note a couple of things here. We live 8 hours from my in-laws and 10 hours from my parents. When we visit, the trip is very taxing mentally and financially, as we often drive through the night to make the most of our off days. I also have narcolepsy, so my husband usually takes the brunt of the drive. We do see my in-laws more as we have a better relationship with them, and they make more of an effort to travel to us as well. My family does not. Before leaving this year, I was intentional about communicating our boundaries over a phone call with my dad. The main one was that my younger brother, 20M, could not be rude to me or my husband because we would leave early. To be clear, when I say rude, I mean cussing us out, calling me the threatening us with violence, etc. This post would get way too long to give all the context, so the short and sweet of it is, my brother has always had behavior issues that require medication. When he hit puberty, most of those manifested into anger, and he was severely mentally and emotionally abusive to everyone in the house. Over the years, it's gotten less explosive and more calculated, and because of this, we don't have much of a relationship. My parents, especially my mom, have always made excuses for his behavior, saying, "That's just his diagnosis," or "That's just your brother," with the underlying implication that we should just accept it. They also won't acknowledge that said abuse ever occurred. Now, please hear me when I say I understand how complex behavioral diagnoses can be, and how taxing it is to go through all the medications, therapy, etc. But after growing up with two brothers who both have these issues, the other is 23, there is a point where the diagnosis stops and your choices begin. As I said, our only boundary was that my brother not be rude. I really wanted to enjoy our visit, as I haven't seen my family since July and we won't be able to travel for Christmas due to how it falls this year, and a lack of PTO. We almost made it. It's Saturday night, and we're all having a conversation about my brother being the favorite. LOL, not kidding. My mom had joking dismissed it, but then attempted to point out in a conversation with me that my brother's name on Life 360 was indeed the favorite child. Upon hearing this, my husband leans over to me and neutrally remarks that he didn't realize I was still on Life 360 with my family. I said that I was, as I thought when I moved, it would give my parents peace of mind to see me moving around on the map. He then comments that the logic there was funny, because if I got taken, my parents wouldn't know where I was even supposed to be. Again, he said this very neutrally, and to me. My brother immediately straightens up and calls my husband a dumbs. My husband, who doesn't agree with how my family treats me and can't stand my brother, immediately claps back with, "Actually, you're the dumbs." And they get into it. It ended with my brother threatening to break a glass bottle upside my husband's face and storming out of the house. Afterwards, my mom turns to my husband and says that she doesn't appreciate that kind of language in her home, and that arguing with my brother is not helpful. My husband retorts that my brother might get away with speaking to them that way, but he is not allowed to speak to us that way. My mom jumps to my brother's defense and they argued a bit more. Later, my dad came in and asked what happened. After explaining that my brother cannot cuss and threaten my husband, my dad said, "Well, you know that's just your brother." Honestly, I'm surprised we went this long without incident. We were there 32 hours total. I ended the night crying and realizing that my parents not holding my brother accountable for his actions ever, and defending him especially now, after communicating our boundaries clearly, is another way they are choosing him over me. I told my husband that we would not be returning to visit if my brother is present, and that he does not have an invitation to our home. My parents don't know yet. Wibta for telling my parents if my brother is present, we won't be? Last note, when my husband apologized the next morning for getting heated with my mom, her response was, "Thank you for apologizing. I won't ever apologize for my son's diagnosis, but it can get heated." After reading a couple of comments, I do want to clarify, I don't know what my brother's specific diagnosis is, but he does take medication to regulate it. For years, he has exhibited psychopathic tendencies like harming animals intentionally, not showing remorse, or taking accountability for situations where he's caused physical harm, and outwardly enjoying causing someone emotionally pain through words. I've also seen him exhibit way better control over his anger when he thinks it will benefit him, for example, in front of a girlfriend or in public spaces. He also can successfully live on his own, and he is currently AWOL from the army and hiding out at my parents' home. OP is not an AH for prioritizing her emotional well-being and setting boundaries with her toxic brother. Despite knowing his toxic side, OP's parents are AHs for not taking accountability for his abusive behavior and defending him. So I would rate OP's parents 3.5, and OP's toxic brother 2 out of 5, and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Pokemamic. AITA. If I threw away the things my ex left behind while he was moving, then blocked him, I, 23F, ended things with my ex, 24M, a little over a month ago. I ended things because I was basically doing everything. I was paying 80% of the bills and was expected to clean and make dinner on top of it. For context, I'm a second-year electrical apprentice, and he was thrifting/flipping things, not very frequently IMO, and working about 16 hours at his dad's antique store. I understand I would have to probably pay a bulk of the bills because I was making more than he was because he wasn't actually flipping items. But we had an original agreement that he would pay the utilities and what he could towards rent. Before we switched to another unit, he was paying a good chunk of rent, but unfortunately never followed the agreement to pay utilities. But I just let it slide because bills were getting paid. Along with the financial stress, he just demanded a lot of emotional attention, which was hard for me to give. I still did, because I loved him. But it was very draining when every day there was a new issue that would shake him to the core. I'm a closed-off person with my emotions, and only show them if I feel really comfortable with someone. But I could never really show him, because we were always tackling his issues, which were usually the same 5 issues, cycling through over and over again. He would always expect me to listen to any issues he had, but when I would bring something up, it would turn into an argument. For example, there was a time where I asked him to clean up more because I was doing the bulk of it, and I was told I was selfish and ignorant. When we weren't being intimate as much, I brought it up and was told I give him anxiety when I'm overly. And if there wasn't an argument, he would completely disregard what I said. Like instead of trimming his beard over a trash can, he would clog the sink time and time again and expect me to unclog it. I would ask him to always flush the toilet because there were multiple occasions I walked into a bathroom that smelt like fermented piss, and a couple occasions where there was a log waiting to greet me. Unfortunately, that request from me annoyed him. If I did something silly, there was a 50% chance I would annoy him, and he voiced that to me. There were plenty of times where he did something that annoyed me, but I would never voice that because why tell your partner they're annoying? My final straw was when he bought 31 hats for $12 and was given an offer to sell them from $500 or trade them in for $700 store credit. We had rent due the next week, and instead of selling the hats, he traded them even though I told him multiple times I thought he should sell them. He was $500 short that month, so I had to put that extra sum on my credit card. Unfortunately, that had been the 3rd consecutive month something like that happened. I know it's bad, and I'm dealing with the consequences of enabling him. When I mentioned it bothered me, and I didn't think it was a smart decision. Instead of apologizing, he showed me the vintage shirts he got and tried to justify his actions. When I ended things, he called me immature and made me sit next to him while he called his parents, so I could hear how heartbroken he was. After he left, he had his mom text me to coordinate times for him to pick up the dog and see her for a day, rather than coordinate plans to pack his stuff. He had accumulated a lot of things, I'm talking thousands of collectibles, that he was supposed to sell. After 2 weeks of him not getting things, I told his mom he should probably come and pack things while they wait to get keys for their new place. She made the excuse that he just started a new job at Target, so he wouldn't have time, but they would be able to have everything out by the end of the month. Fast forward to when they were moving his stuff out, I came back to an absolute mess, which I understand. I feel like that could have been avoided if they would have listened to my suggestion. At this point, he was finally mature enough to talk to me and admitted he was extremely overwhelmed. So that's why things were the way they were. If only someone would have told them that. They finally got the last of his stuff out and I got his key. But now that I'm looking to move into a cheaper situation, I've found things like his childhood trophies, some LeBron James pictures he was super hyped about getting a few years ago, hats, a giant bag of Legos, I kind of just want to sell those, golf clubs, etc. I know for a fact he took a lot of things that I liked more than he did, and having to deal with so much financial strain because of him, I kind of just want to trash the remainder of what's left and block him on everything. I just feel like he got off easy with not having to deal with paying all the rent at this place and the credit card debt. AITA, if I just trash the rest of what's here. OP is not an AH for ending a toxic relationship with her ex. Her ex is an AH for taking full advantage of her, both emotionally and financially. Her reaction is 100% justified. She did nothing wrong. Instead, she is protecting her emotional well-being. So, I would rate OP 0 out of 5, and OP's X 3.5 on the AH scale. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye bye. See you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.